p.m. Welcome back to the Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting this Tuesday, January 8, 2019. All commissioners present and accounted for. We are now getting ready to move on to our item 8D, which is our recap of our previous board discussion and direction regarding the new Lane County Courthouse, and I will continue riffing for a minute or two while we welcome to the table our county administrator and county administrator Steve Mokrzycki and our legislative and intergovernmental affairs manager Alex Kyler. Just want to mention that at our current plan of recessing at 3 o'clock. I don't really want to do that because we got the room set up. Do we have an idea of how many legislators are coming? Five. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 places for them plus the presiding judge. So that'll all work out. We might have to ask Mr. Kyler or maybe even Mr. Mokrzycki to and you can move down. Good. Okay, so that being said, we had a pretty significant discussion, several, regarding the board discussion and direction on the courthouse. We, of course, have the Lane County Courthouse scoping study that I know has been distributed to the commissioners. And now I'd like to call on Steve Mokrzycki to talk about this before our 3:30 time certain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. So this is a briefing that will provide an abbreviated version of what was presented by Robertson Sherwood, which is a local architecture firm, and DLR Group, a national expert in courthouse design, on December 18th, 2018. So this will be redundant for at least 3 of you. But we felt like, given the fact that we're entering into a discussion with our legislators this afternoon, we'd be remiss if we didn't provide some of this information and allow for a discussion and questions and answers, at least for the 2 new commissioners, although I know that they're both familiar with a lot of this information. So what I'd like to do is provide you a brief recap of the history, sort of how we got to this point just over the past 4 or 5 years. We have a video that we're not going to show you because you've already seen it. You saw it yesterday, and we're going to show it to the legislators. So 2 times in 2 days is probably enough. We didn't think you needed 3 times. But we will then provide a bit of an overview, an abbreviated version of the scoping study that was done. And then we'll talk about update on the purchase and sale agreement, the cost information, the election results, the polling results from the survey that was completed most recently, and then a timeline, as well as some other legislative matters. So that's what we're going to try to accomplish here as quickly as possible, and I would just encourage questions as we're going through this so we can have sort of an open discussion. So first, just a brief recap on the history. In 2014, the Association of Oregon Counties, in collaboration with the Oregon Judicial Department and the Chief Justice of the Oregon Supreme Court, developed a task force to evaluate proposals for county courthouse replacements across the state. And the goal was to identify the most viable projects that could be placed in the Chief Justice's recommended budget I believe in 2015 legislature on a prioritized basis. In July of 2015, Lane County formally entered the queue of prioritized projects after we submitted an application to OJD for what is called the OCCIF, the Oregon Courthouse Capital Construction Improvement Fund. This is the statewide bonding initiative to provide state funding for development of new construction of new courthouses that are in need across the state. To date, Jefferson County and Multnomah County are the 2 other counties that have Jefferson County's courthouse was the first that was funded, construction complete, and it's opened, and Multnomah is nearing completion of construction of their new courthouse. Later in 2015, the county formally engaged the National Center for State Courts to undertake a long-term needs assessment. That assessment, this is a national group that specializes in these efforts. We really were trying to verify, you know, on a basic level, what's the square footage needs, what are the space requirements, and some basic sort of planning work to be done. So that was done in later 2015, and that assessment was completed in May of 16. During the 2016 legislative session, the Oregon legislature approved an initial $1.4 million in bond funding authorization for planning for Lane County's courthouse. And then during the 2017 legislative session, the Oregon legislature approved a second bond funding authorization of $5 million for pre-construction development. So to date, the legislature has authorized $6.4 million for Lane County's work. Those funds have not all been spent, of course, and I don't think any of it has been actually collected as of yet, but it has been authorized. During 2017 and 18, Lane County collaboratively worked with the city of Eugene to examine downtown development projects through a series of public meetings, studies, and focus groups. That would ultimately, that work ultimately concluded with a jointly negotiated purchase and sale agreement to transfer the properties, the city-owned former City Hall block and the county-owned Butterfly lot. The NCSC study that was done, the needs assessment study that was done in 2015, completed in 16, that information is really what informed the county about the fact that the size of the Butterfly lot was not going to be adequate to accommodate the size of the courthouse facility that was needed. So that informed the discussions with the city of Eugene, and a lot of collaborative work happened there. I'll provide you a brief update on the purchase and sale agreement in a minute. In August of 2018, Lane County engaged Robertson Sherwood and DLR Group, as I mentioned, to undertake a scoping study. And that's what we'll brief you on here. And that was to validate that the former City Hall site would actually work, to refine the numbers that were identified in the NCSC study from a square footage, to go deeper in terms of our analysis, understanding, and planning for how a new courthouse would function. It is not a design, so we do not have a design for the facility, but it is what we call blocking and stacking, the massing of the facility, the total square footage. We also hired JMB Consulting, which is a national consulting firm that does conceptual cost estimates for projects like this, and so they developed the cost estimates based on those scoping study results. In December of 2018, the Oregon Governor Kate Brown released her recommended budget, and it refers to Lane County's courthouse project. The Judicial Department of the state of Oregon, which is a separate branch of government, has its own recommended budget that was developed by the Chief Justice, and the Chief Justice identified a total of $145.5 million in courthouse projects for the next biennium. 87.6 million of those funds are identified for Lane County's courthouse project. So that is in the Chief Justice's recommended budget, and it is mentioned in the governor's proposed budget. So that's the history briefly on the purchase and sale agreement. We are nearing completion of that. We're getting down to a very technical and legal review, final legal review from both the city and county staff and legal counsel. We anticipate that by the end of January, the various documents to execute the purchase and sale of both properties will be signed and completed. And there's additional things that go along with that. We're collaborating with the city around the need for additional temporary parking downtown, and so that is a part of the process in those discussions as well. So you're going to hear that timeline review again when we meet with the legislators at 3:30. We would now cut to the video, but we won't show you that. And I'll pause for a moment if you have any questions about the timeline.
What were the basic numbers? 6.4 million I wrote down was authorized by the previous legislatures. And what is in the governor's proposed budget? And there was one other number I think you mentioned in terms of dollars.
87.6 million is what's in the governor's, but there are three numbers.
Okay,
In 2016 session, 1.4 million
okay,
was approved, was authorized for planning.
okay,
In 2017, 5 million was approved for pre-construction. That's how we get to the 6.4, 1.4 plus 5 million.
okay. So
And then the 87.6 million is the construction, the 50% of the state cost of the construction.
and that's 50% of the state part of the facility. So say buying the lot from the city would not be part of it. It might be part of it. It might be. It is included.
Yeah,
Okay.
a portion of it. So
All right.
50% of the cost of the land.
Now, one of the things that I'm very interested in is the polling and what positive features of the polling we can share with the legislators.
We'll have a slide for you on that
Okay.
in a minute. Do you mind, or
No.
do you want to see that now? Yeah.
No, I don't mind.
So we're going to do, the next was going to be the scoping study,
Okay,
and then we will show you the budget number, which you've seen, and then we'll do you'll see the same slides you saw December 18th related to the polling results.
okay. Any questions or comments before we move to that? Okay, go for it.
So is that good?
Yeah, I think I might just add, there is a fourth number as well that Steve mentioned, which was 145 million. That's the total amount that the Chief Justice has proposed for courthouse improvements and replacements in the biennium. So we're
For the
not
state, for the whole
for
state.
So we're not the only one in the queue. There are 3 other counties that are in various planning stages.
Is our 87.6 part of the 145?
Is
It's a big part of the
a big
145.
part of
I would
it.
say it's the biggest part.
Yep.
I have one question.
Yes.
Steve, what percent of the total is going to be for the state court?
Percent of the total
You said that
construction
they're
costs?
sharing- Well, you said that they're going to share half of their total.
Yeah.
So what is their total?
Well, if you back up from, and we'll show you the total project costs here, I think it's 258 million. 252 million, thank you. And so it's 87, whatever, 87 is 87.6. Actually, no, it's 94. So it's 94. 87.6 plus 5 plus 1.4 is 94 million.
I apologize. I asked the question incorrectly. You said that represented a percent of the total cost.
The total state amount
Yes.
is estimated at $94 million,
Oh,
total
that,
state.
so that
80
represents 100% of the state's.
94 million is 100% of the state's portion. And then it's 94 divided by 252 is the percentage.
And Commissioner Burney, it's a sort of a negotiation, honestly. By the time we get down to negotiating an agreement with the Department of Justice on what that really is, and it's informed by whatever legislation that we might actually be able to pass
So
this
right now it's
session.
a soft.
So there's a piece of legislation we're trying to work on that, depending on the outcome of that legislation, will inform what the 50% is actually attributable to.
The bottom line is the state is not going to pay for the portion of the courthouse project that is deemed to be a function of local government. But it's also fair to say that in the current legislative session with the proposed budget of 87.6 million, that represents a huge percentage. I won't say almost all, but a big, big percentage of what the governor and chief justice are suggesting as the money that the state has in this two-year period, this biennium that began that begins July 1, 2019.
No,
Yeah,
that's,
no,
that's
it's
a
not
good
an
question.
interruption. It's very important that we all understand that the state has already provided us significant money, significant in the 1.4 and $5 million range. They've already provided us with 6.4 million, and they are proposing, and this is why it's important that we meet with our legislators, they're proposing at state level another $87.6 million. That is a significant amount, but as former Representative Farr and former Senator Sorensen know, they can choose to not approve the governor's budget. They can make changes in it, and if other counties are lined up to get this money and we aren't, they will give it to other counties.
And that will be part of the conversation we want to have, I think, with the legislators this afternoon. And I think this will become more clear when we talk about percentage breakdown, we go through the scoping study. The big cost drivers that don't qualify for state funding are the sheriff's office and the district attorney's space. And you'll see that here, but there are significant benefits in co-locating all of those. And of course, both the DA and the sheriff are currently located in the current courthouse, which is an adequate space.
Right. And I think I can probably clarify that.
Could you just introduce yourself?
Yes. Chair Sorensen, Commissioners, I'm Jim Cheney. I'm Assistant County Counsel here, and I'm the interim courthouse project manager until we get Mike totally up to speed in about another hour. Anyway, so I've been involved in this. I took this on when our previous capital project manager took another position. But so far as the funding goes and the state match, a couple of things, just because I think they'll be useful when you look at numbers and then they don't seem to quite add up to the same thing. First, the state will provide a 50% match for those things that are for the court and related to the court. But there's also a list of the things that they'll consider in that match and a list that they don't. So it really comes down to probably about 45% of the court-related, because there are some costs, for instance, our costs to administer the contracts, to audit the contractors and that sort of thing. They don't consider things that are capital and wouldn't reimburse because they're not allowed to out of capital funds. So they're going to pay for about 45% of it. The courts actually represent the overwhelming majority of the project, so that's why $94 million out of a $250 million project is because, and that includes not just the courtrooms and the court offices, but also the areas where the secure parking below, the areas where the sheriffs have to bring, the sheriff areas where they bring in the prisoners in, and bring them through the building. So it's everything related to the courts, so it winds up being a substantial part of the whole courthouse, even though it's not a courtroom.
Is there anything you guys want us to tell us before we open it up to questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, is that from?
Yeah. I just want to, before we start pummeling you with questions, I want to make sure you get out whatever you wanted to get out before
Yes.
the legislators
Not
come.
all out yet.
Very good, that's why I'm
What
asking.
I was trying to do was just break after big moments so
Yeah.
that we didn't go through
Okay.
all of it.
I really took no drama classes in college, so I appreciate that pause
There's a
for the
pause,
drum.
and then,
Yeah.
yes. And I do want to introduce Mike Penwell, our new capital projects manager, started with us. I think he's on week 3, week 4, okay, but he comes with almost 2 decades of experience in local government. So we're really excited to have him here. So we'll move into the scoping study now. This was the DLR group and Robertson Sherwood that did this work, and we'll present it to you, an abbreviated version. I wanted to also just reference that we don't oftentimes talk about this, but in September of 2017, we developed and we continue to use this project charter. And we really are running this whole project through project management best practices, so that we're clear about what is our purpose in this effort, what are our values, what is the scope of this work, who are the stakeholders that need to be involved, the decision makers, the various phases of all of this work. And I think it's aided us. So there's a lot of planning that has gone. I mentioned going back to 2014, the various analysis and studies, but we're also we have a wonderful team of staff and elected officials that have and will continue to participate in various ways. And I wanted to just highlight, don't have a slide for this, but within the charter, we identified 4 values that we continue to use to guide this work in the development of this courthouse project. And they spell out to the acronym ACTS: accountability, collaboration, transparency, and stewardship. So those are the 4 values that are guiding this project really from start to finish, that we want to make sure that this is, and you get a sense of, you know, that we recognize this is a public project. This is a facility that is for the public good, and really, you know, creating space for the public to access justice equally. So I want to just make note of that. In terms of the scoping study, this is, and I'll ask our group of staff here to pitch in if you have additional comments to add to this. The goals and objectives that Robertson, Sherwood, and DLR looked at included, and I've heard some of these themes: safety and security of the current facility, the efficiency and accessibility of the courts and the services provided there, right-sizing the spaces. You can see, and you saw in the video yesterday, and we'll see again later today, the, let me see if I can point here. This is one of our courtrooms, and you see, I think this is a snapshot from the video. You have, you know, victims and offenders literally conferring with attorneys in very tight proximity to each other. Here you see the accessibility issues with jurors that have to ride the elevator from the lower level of the public service building, which is not in the courthouse, to from the jury room to the main level. If there's anybody with physical disability and can't use stairs, exit through the main level of the PSB, walk around to the ramp by Harris Hall, which is right over here, up the ramp and in through the building. You know, so these accessibility issues are significant. And then the inmate movement, you see, you know, here the inmates moving in close proximity to, you know, what could be victims and children in this case. So, and then creating a welcoming and customer service oriented facility. This building was opened in 1959. It was not thoughtfully built in the way that we are attempting to thoughtfully build our next courthouse. And so it doesn't function as a state-of-the-art welcoming customer service.
I think we did a pretty good job in 1959, I just want to say that.
That's probably true. And then looking at operational best practices of state-of-the-art courthouses of today. This is the process that the team went through, included facility tours, included working with individuals, doing individual program workshops, looking very granularly at what the staffing requirements are for various operations, sheriff's office, DA, victim services, the courts, looking at operational models and space standards for other courthouses, and then working with stakeholder teams, and including, for example, the City of Eugene and staff at the city to identify ingress and egress, traffic flow for the site, looking at the building organization and what operations and services should be located on the ground floor versus on higher floors, based on how the public utilizes that building, or should utilize this building. And so this is the program verification, the key findings and observations that they identified. Again, the need to create separate circulation systems. We'll show this in a graphic in a moment. Separate circulation for the public, for private parties that are going through the court system, and for secure parties, including inmates or offenders that have that are coming through the court system. The current courthouse has 15 courtrooms. The proposed new courthouse would have 18 courtrooms. We'll talk a little bit about why that is and what will be different, not only in the number of courtrooms, but the size and the makeup and the flexibility of those courtrooms, because we also know that the judicial system today does not function the way that the judicial system functioned 50 years ago or 60 years ago when the current site facility was opened. And so really developing flexible courtroom environments, making sure that we have accessible spaces for everybody, making sure that we have the technology that's necessary to operate an efficient court system, and deal with various case types. You heard this from the presiding judge in the video. And then jury services located within the courthouse behind secured screening areas. These things, then this is continue the key findings: dispute resolution dispute resolution suite and mediation space, main office for the sheriff's operations. That includes best practices for emergency operations center, the armory, and dispatch. We know that the current courthouse has seismic issues, and the emergency operations center and dispatch are located within that facility. It's not adequate in the event of a natural disaster, and so we're planning for that the new facility would accommodate emergency operations and dispatch, as well as secure equipment that the sheriff's office in particular needs access to.
May I add one thing? That as an essential facility, the sheriff's office would be designed to be functional. If there were such a seismic event, it could continue to operate as they would have backup power and backup power, so that it continue to operate its radio systems as the actual center without, even after a seismic event, so it'd be fully functional.
So this includes the DA, District Attorney's Office, and public access, a grand jury suite. You've heard, I think, the District Attorney talk about the inadequacy of the grand jury room, co-location of the DA Family Law Division in the courthouse, and then inclusion of state program space. That includes the Public Defender's Office. So all of these things were considered as part of the program overview. This gives you a snapshot if you were standing at the top of a one floor of what two courtrooms would have looked like with the intake area. So you see the holding area in pink in the middle and the courtrooms in blue. And this configuration reflects what a traditional trial case may be set up for. But all of these things are flexible, and so these jury boxes will be able to be removed. All of this can be moved to, and these attorney-client conference spaces, which we don't currently have, are flexible, and so the walls can be removed here to allow for a larger room to accommodate our specialty courts, which we've seen great success and results from our mental health court, our drug court, our veterans court, and we see an expansion of those courts in the future. And so we're excited about not just fixing the problems with the existing courthouse, but the opportunities presented through the development of a new courthouse that gives us this larger flexible space to be able to enhance the diversionary courts and the specialty courts that have been so successful. And then, of course, again, these private spaces for attorney-client conferences that don't currently exist. These intakes, you can see these secure intakes create an environment where inmates will be brought into the underground level of the courthouse and taken through a secure elevator intake up directly to the courtroom. And then you have a holding cell, a secure corridor. This is the elevator here, and this would be the entrance directly into the courtroom. And here you have attorney and inmate conference space. So all of this creates a very secure environment where the public and victims do not have to come into direct contact with offenders and inmates when they're going through the judicial process. Is there anything else? Okay. Any questions so far?
Thank you for inviting the questions. I did have a question about the point at which we, as commissioners, will be involved in further advisory role in what the buildings would look like and how they're constructed and what period of time they're constructed in. Recognizing this is a joint project with the state and the county, what is your view of where the county's role is in some of the more details of this? Who's going to get the contract to do it? Things of that sort.
All of those pieces would all come after we've identified the funding.
Okay.
To do that work. There is no design. So
Yep.
everything that we're showing here is.
Yeah, this is part of the scoping.
This is the scoping
Yep.
study that informs the cost. So the extent to which the things we've laid out here in terms of the configuration of the facility are significantly adjusted, that could drive cost changes. But it was, doing this work was really critical in identifying square footage and orientation on the site and ultimately cost.
The other question I had was back to the state role in this, if we're providing an additional $87.6 million, not being half of the total, but being a big chunk of the total. Some of the things on the wall that were listed would be clearly in the sheriff's department arena, and some would be clearly in the court part. And I understand the sheriff part in general is not part of the state responsibility. So the, moving the inmates within the building and having the inmate areas, that'd be part of courts because it's a court design. But where the sheriff is located and how much work of the sheriff's office is in this building, maybe the emergency response could be in the building, maybe it could not be in the building, because that, as I understand, emergency response would clearly not be part of the state function.
Correct.
So when would the board be able to say, well, one way to pare down the cost of this thing is to take out the stuff that the local people, local taxpayer isn't going to pay for, and really maximize that 87.6 plus the 6.4 million the state's already given us? In other words, what things that are county, and I'm not really asking when is this going to get done, I'm more asking what's the role of the board in providing feedback on it?
Well, I would say that feedback should occur sooner rather than later. We've, for several years, and this goes back to the NCSC study, in these analyses and recommendations, we've been having the conversation with the board about really the need to co-locate the sheriff's office and the district attorney's office. They're currently co-located in the current courthouse. So if you only look at creating a courthouse that does not include the district attorney and the sheriff's office, you would reduce the overall cost, but you also will not have fixed the issues that the sheriff and the DA face in the current facility. You're going to have to identify another, which will have a cost to it. You also will not have created we will not have created the environment that captures the greatest opportunity for maximum efficiency of operations, reduction of operational costs, or control of operational costs. So we've had those conversations, I think, throughout this process, and then while we understand that those have an impact on the overall cost of the facility, I think the general consensus has been that this proposal has the greatest opportunity for maximum success and efficiency of operations. But I would say now is the time for that. To go back to your first question, Commissioner, the board and the county has a significant role in making decisions now. So obviously the board will be charged with making a decision about whether or not to refer a matter to the voters. As that moves forward and when it moves forward, after funding is identified, both local and state funding is secured, going through a public process for design and construction of the facility, what that looks like, what our priorities and principles and values are around those things, the selection of those professionals to do that work, the actual input around design and materials and all of those kinds of things, all are going to be under the purview of the board ultimately. So I hope that answers the question just about the role of the commissioners in the county.
Sure.
Just adding to that, I would imagine there's a cost to having them separated as well. So no matter which way we go, there's going to be a cost whether they're apart or whether they're together.
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at that, and then maybe Jim can elaborate on it. But yes, in the sense that we know that the current courthouse is not only inadequate for the court system, but it's also inadequate for the sheriff's office. I think in the video you heard the story about leaky sewage pipes that are literally I mean, that's not a maybe what if kind of thing. That's literally that happened like a few months ago where we had sewage leaking into two detectives' office that were, and onto evidence that was part of an active investigation, I believe a murder investigation.
Real pictures.
Yeah, so these are things that are really happening. So, right, if we don't accommodate the needs of the sheriff and the DA, not only are you not dealing with the opportunities for operational and efficiency maximization, you're also not addressing the costs that ultimately we're still going to have to put into identifying another location for those services.
Yes, I guess just to add to that, one of the factors that drives this is just that the existing courthouse building is 60 years old this year and is at the end of its operational service life in terms of its mechanical and electrical systems, and it wasn't designed for any seismic performance. So whether the sheriff's office and district attorney were to remain in that building or were not to be relocated, we'd pretty much have to put them somewhere. Because long-term, there isn't a future of leaving them in that building without essentially, gutting the building and starting over structurally, mechanically, and electrically. Operationally, it's significant because one of the things that allows the sheriff to staff the courthouse now is the fact there are so many other officers that are there that they can provide additional backup security for any kind of events that come up. And if their courthouse is a block away, that has some that increases the operational issues. And for the district attorney, it's probably a more obvious one, because if we're going to pay people to be attorneys and have to walk a block every time that they have to go to court and back, it's a significant time. I mean, that's time that's not spent doing prosecutions or investigations. So it's a good thing, I think, to think about putting those there, but there are alternatives to doing that as well, depending on what the board wants to do.
Okay, anything further?
This is sort of a good segue to the comments here about the breakdown of services. This is the recommended square footage per operation. So you can see here, courtrooms and chambers, 83%, court administration, 83,000 square feet. Court administration, DA, sheriff transport, sheriff main office, parole and probation, state offices, secure parking, and then public facilities and building support. So that brings us to total building area of approximately 300,000 square feet. And then we'll show, we just have a couple more slides on the scoping study. This is the proposed project site, which I think everyone is familiar with. This is the current courthouse on 7th and Oak, the Public Services Building. Here's the Butterfly Lot, and this is the former City Hall block that is being proposed for.
Little smaller than Jerry's.
This is the stacking diagram. So you see a 7-story building on, again, this is the current courthouse, Public Services Building. You see a 7-story building. You see 2 intakes. This is what's in pink is the sheriff's office, pink red, is the sheriff's 2-story building and the sheriff's office. And this would be the entry for the sheriff's office. I believe non-secure entry for the sheriff's office. And you see the public lobby area in the first 2 floors here. And this would be the public entrance for the courthouse, the secured public entrance for the courthouse facility. And you can sort of see in the back of the lot here, adjacent to 7th Street, is what is intended to be surface parking lot or a potential future parking structure. This is 8th Street and Pearl and High. This is the building section area. So if you just look floor by floor, this is what is currently proposed based on this scoping study. Of course, this is open for discussion and refinement, but it's based on the courthouse experts that we've hired in collaboration with our stakeholders. So you have office building support. This is lower level office building support. courtrooms, court support, and then you have, so this is in the courthouse facility here. This is not representing the sheriff's office, but the courtroom specifically. And I think that's it for the scoping study. Anything else? And then we'll transition to cost estimates and polling results.
Do you want to have more questions on this phase, or how do you want to do that?
Whatever is your, if you have more questions on
I'd
sort of
rather,
the-
oh, go ahead. What would you like to?
No, I'm interrupting you, I'm sorry.
Okay, I was just going to say, why don't we get through the presentation, and then we'll just open it up to everything. That way, everybody will be able to ask what they want.
Alex is going to pull up. It's a separate presentation.
Yeah. How do you get to that?
Perhaps while we're doing that, I should mention the scoping study isn't like this is a preliminary plan or a model for this. This study was done to take all those areas and to take the relationships between what needs to be next to something else and figure out a way that this would work together. It doesn't mean this is the final way that a courthouse would be built, but in order to come up with a realistic price, it's necessary to at least understand what would work. I mean, we may not wind up buying a Honda crossover SUV, but once we may wind up with any of a number of brands, but once we know what a Honda costs, we know that the other ones are going to cost about the same amount of money, whichever one is really right for us.
Okay, you can go to the next, and we'll show you the cost side first. The expenses include the land purchase of $5.4 million, construction costs of $180 million, and then associated project costs of $66.5 million. Before we go on to revenue, is there anything you want to talk about in terms of, in particular, the associated project costs, what's included there?
Well, the associated project cost is everything that isn't in what would be estimated as the current construction cost if you were to build it and you were just to write a check for the contractor. The additional funds are the architectural fees, anticipated inflation over the period of time between the time project was authorized and the time that contracts were let, permit fees, furniture and equipment for the building. Everything that isn't the actual amount of money you'd pay the contractor is part of the associated project costs, including the county's administrative costs.
That's the line that also holds the project contingency too, so that as we move forward with design and discover new things, we always hold some contingency so that you're not caught by surprises later.
What's the contingency percent?
I was going to ask that question.
Sorry,
Oh, no, that's
Well,
fine.
we'll all get to ask our questions when they finish their presentation.
I think it's about 7.5% for owner-generated contingencies.
thank you.
There's a contingency within the construction estimate for the things that will come up that will need to be accommodated because of construction changes. However, for things that happen to the program during the course of construction, there's a separate contingency.
This is an all-in cost. And so we said, as I mentioned, our values, we started with one of those values is transparency. And we felt it really important that we didn't come to the board and say, well, here's the construction costs, and not include the other piece, that this is the entire project. And I think there's maybe some misconstruing of comments made at the December 18th meeting. It is our commitment that the project will not exceed this total cost. Our goal is to bring that cost below, but we're saying it's not going to go above this number. And so I want the board to have a confidence level with that. And then on the revenue side, how will we pay for this? An estimated $94 million from the state, which we've talked about. Local funding needed, $158 million. That's the balance of the cost of the project. And so we've had some conversations with the board about that on December 18th, and we'll have a conversation next week, a first reading of an ordinance, so there will be more opportunity to talk specifically about what that could look like. And we continue to work at the staff level at trying to identify any funding that we could identify, federal funding. We know there have been some conversations about infrastructure, and Congressman DeFazio is now the the chair of the Transportation Committee in the House, and we think that presents some exciting opportunities from a general standpoint in terms of infrastructure package, but that is not for certain. As well as looking at our own resources and identifying any one-time money that could be used to try to reduce the impact on new costs that our local taxpayers would have to bear. So that's that on the cost estimate. If you don't have any questions there, we are going to pivot into the polling results.
I was hoping we could get the whole thing,
Okay.
the remainder of
Let's
the
do
whole
that.
thing
Okay.
before we jump in. Otherwise, I think we could easily bump up against the legislators,
Fair enough.
because there's going to be a lot of questions.
So I'll tee this up, and then Alex, you can jump in with some additional comments. We conducted between November 26th and December 8th, 2018, a poll of 382 frequent voters. Those were individuals who voted in 3 of 4 or 4 of 4 most recent elections. The margin of error for the survey is plus or minus 5% with a 95% level of confidence. What we tested was voter support for a bond measure at the rate of 29 cents per thousand of assessed value. And we also asked a series of questions about priorities. So there's the first question was, would you support 29 cents per thousand, which would have this impact on the average property tax payer? And we got those results, and you see those results on the left. And then we asked a series of questions. Do you know this about the courthouse? Do you know the courthouse serves these? And we'll go through some of those pieces to sort of see how people felt before they knew much about what the building did, and then after they understood sort of information about what the courthouse was, how did they feel about the proposal after that? So before those arguments were put forward, 47, just on the raw question of would you support a bond of, this would be a 20-year bond at 29 cents per thousand throughout Lane County. 47% favored the proposal, 44% were opposed, and 9% were unsure. Then after we went through a series of questions, and we'll go through a few of these with you, the level of support shifted to 53%, so from 47 to 53% in favor, 43% opposed, and then 9% unsure to 4% unsure. So you saw most of the shift happening from people who were unsure moving into the favorable category. So in terms of what we heard specifically that helps inform, I also say we also conducted a voter survey in April of 2018, and that was not around cost or taxes. It was simply around voter understanding of what courthouses do, their knowledge and support for various functions within the courthouse. That information that we heard has helped inform some of the informational things that we've put together, including the video and flyers that we put together to understand sort of what do voters understand and what do they value about Justice Center. So the two messages that resonated the most for frequent voters were state funded, were really revolved around state funding. 63% of respondents said they favored a measure if the county would not collect that amount. Whatever was being asked would not be collected from local taxpayers unless the state allocated it. So there's some hook in the local request. The other piece that was very compelling for frequent voters was the $94 million that is on the table. 61% of respondents favored a measure if Lane County was able to receive up to $94 million in matching state funds. So that's a big piece for folks. And I think that's what's driving this timeline. That's why we're talking about such an aggressive timeline of May, that the legislature is going through its process. There is competition around the state for these funds, and we are in the queue, and we have $94 million that we have access to, and we want to try to take advantage of that opportunity before it's lost. A few other things that we heard. Adequate space for people with disabilities. 62% of people favored the proposal when they understood that it would adequately address access for people with disabilities. 61% were concerned about safety and security improvements, such as separate areas for victims and families. So again, the questions were asked, would you support this proposal if you understood that it was going to fix access to for people with disabilities, if you understood it was going to fix the safety and security of victims and families in the public. 61% supported the understanding of expanding specialty courts. That was very impactful. And 59% understood that our population has more than doubled since the current courthouse was constructed 60 years ago, and it's used by approximately 600 people per day. You heard the 33,000 cases per year, 600 people per day go through. Is that it, Alex, on that? Did you have anything else you want to add?
Well, only that, you know, we've used this kind of polling in the past to, you know, as scientific as it can be, to then think about how to craft voter messaging, ballot measure question language, that sort of thing. So there's sort of a lot of purposes for doing polling, and it's really valuable as we go through this process.
Okay, now Alex is going to talk about the election. We have 2 items left. Election timeline and process, and then maybe legislative update.
So what we had recommended to the board at the December 18th meeting, we did provide both calendars for both the coming elections, May 21st, 2019 and November 5th, 2019. We think there's pretty good rationale for looking at the May 21st election, and probably the most important being that the capital construction discussion in Salem really, as much as Steve mentioned that both the governor's recommended budget and the Chief Justice's recommended budget have made these recommendations, capital discussions in Salem don't really get up and going until sort of May, June, and finalize. I mean, they're going to try to get out this year in late June. So those conversations are held pretty late in the session. We think that, you know, having our election results parallel with that gives us a much better shot at getting the state funding rather than essentially going to the legislature with a promise that will go to the voters in a future election. And then the other thing, of course, was that the polling does address those frequent voters, and those are typically the ones who do show up at the May election. So we think that the polling is more indicative of voter behavior at the May election. But we did, there's statutorily, you have to sort of back up from May 21st and think about a number of things that have to occur that the board gets involved with. And so we produced this calendar that outlines where we expect to be. And we really did need to start that conversation in December because, as you can see, in order to sort of stick to this timeline, for example, we'd actually have an action scheduled for you to consider in next week's board meeting. One of the elements that we talked about in terms of really trying to instill voter confidence was how do we ensure that the Lane County voter doesn't feel like there's going to be some sort of bait and switch, that the county sort of promises this money is coming from the state, and then if it doesn't materialize, still spends the local dollar. So county council suggested, well, we write an ordinance, put it in Lane County code that the board would be limited to spending any local money until 4 things happen. The legislature passes a measure, the governor signs the measure, then the voters approve a local measure, and then the board actually has a role in issuing the actual bond. So there's sort of 4 elements that would have to occur prior to the local taxpayer actually feeling the impact of their vote. And so that's why we've got, ordinance requires a couple different readings. That's why we've scheduled for January 15th, the first reading of that ordinance that would do that work. In previous efforts that we've been involved with, including now 2 sheriff levies for the jail beds and the vehicle registration fee, we committed to a lot of public process around vetting ballot measure language and hearing from the public. And so in the calendar, we've included 2 different opportunities for public comment for ballot measure language on January 29th and on February 12th. We believe that the board will be very interested in knowing how voter information will get out, and so we've scheduled some calendar for that that issue as well. And the long and short of it is that statutorily, the county clerk has to get a form on March 1st in order to qualify for the election on May 21st. And so that's the calendar that thus far we've stuck to. The previous board gave us head nods to move forward in that direction, and I think the purpose of today's meeting was to, to take questions and ensure that we're still all in that same time frame.
Okay, anything further before we go to the lightning rounds?
Last thing I'd say is I know there's been some inquiry and discussion around the difference between an informational pamphlet and a informational brochure and a voter's pamphlet. We will, I think we'll want we'll need board direction on that. We want the board to understand the difference clearly understand the difference between those two from a cost, logistical, and timing standpoint. And ultimately, it's the board's decision. So whatever the board wants to do, we will do. But we'd like to do, and I'm sort of preempting what I think may be a part of a discussion, is to come back maybe next week and give you some of that information to say, here are the differences between those, and then at least preliminarily get some indication about where you would like to go, what direction you'd like to go, because there's a lot of work involved in that effort, and we want to begin that as quickly as possible. So any comments you have on that today would be helpful, but I think we're trying to reserve some time next week to share some information with the board and then get some more clear direction on that matter.
Okay, anything further?
I guess just before we get to questions, we are meeting with the delegation this afternoon. Delegation's been really supportive of our efforts to date. Our delegation is well situated. We were a little bit dismayed when Nancy Nathanson was moved from Ways and Means, obviously, to House Revenue, but we still have a couple members on Ways and Means, Senator Beyer and Representative Holvey and Senator Manning are all on Ways and Means. And so we've got really good advocates for our cause up there. As I indicated, we do have a bill that we've introduced. We've pre-session filed, House Bill 2605, and that is a bill that will go along with the bonding authorization. We've worked very closely with Clackamas County on that, as Clackamas is the other county that's in the queue for this. And so there were a couple things that both counties felt they needed that were a little different than statute that was authorized for the previous bond issuances that were primarily for Multnomah County. So we've got that in the queue, and I think we're really looking forward to getting up to Salem starting January 26th or 22nd and begin advocacy on this effort.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think we're ready to give you guys some comments and questions. I thought what we would do is go on a 4-minute timer. And so each commissioner will get 4 minutes. That includes all response time, so please feel free to cut off any response if you want to make any other comments. And we'll go as many rounds as possible.
That
So
doesn't work for me.
how much more time do you want?
I need to be on board, right? I mean, we need a unanimous county
No,
commission.
no. Here's what I'm saying, Commissioner.
My questions would take, my questions and my education about what I think is a path forward would take more time.
Okay, I am willing to go as late as possible in today's meeting. I'm not trying to cut off any lengthy time. What I'm trying to say is, if you need more time to ask a specific question or make a specific comment, I'm willing to do that. I just want to make sure it's equal to all commissioners. So my suggestion was that we give everybody 4 minutes, and then we give everybody 4 more minutes, and we keep going, whether
Forgive my
it's...
enthusiasm.
No, and we keep going. We suspend when the legislators come, but when they leave, we keep going. And tomorrow, when we are finishing our budget meeting, we keep going. So in no way am I intending to limit the amount of time. I just want to make sure it's equally distributed among the commissioners. And if 4 minutes seems a little short, I'm open to saying, well, maybe a little longer. So what do you think about that? Is that fair?
Oh, it's whatever you want. I'm sorry. I'm just really.
It's really not whatever I want. It's what the board wants. Yeah.
May I suggest one thing, Commissioner, that many of your questions, we need to know the answers to. So don't feel that there are any inappropriate questions, but if there are any that you may think may be covered in a more lengthy fashion away from a public meeting, perhaps one-on-one with administration or project management, that's your discretion. But really, your questions are my questions, so.
I totally agree with Commissioner Farr that there really are no questions that are, you know, off. If you're thinking of it, that means there's 50,000 people, you know, out there that are thinking of it. So it's really important we get all the questions out. My suggestion was that we have a 4-minute round, meaning each person, each commissioner will get 4 minutes. And because I've called on everybody by seniority, I'd like to start it with reverse seniority this time. So that would be in order. It'd be Commissioner Berney, Commissioner Buck, Commissioner Farr, Commissioner Bozovich, and myself, 4 minutes each. And then we'll do another 4-minute round. And we'll keep doing those until the legislators come. And then after the legislators leave, after we finish our legislator meeting, I'd like to keep going until such time as commissioners feel the board meeting should end. I feel like, you know, if we want to end at 5, that's fully acceptable to me. If we want to go farther, that's acceptable. But I would like tomorrow, after the work session on the budget kickoff, and after lunch, depending on how long that takes, I'd like to start up again at 1:30 with more questions, because I agree there's a lot of questions and things that commissioners have that we need to get to the bottom of. And that way we will have a virtually unlimited opportunity for people to ask questions. And if they feel that 4 minutes is too long or too short, we can make that longer. But I'm just throwing that out as a timeline. So with that said, I'll start the timer and recognize Commissioner Berney.
Before my time starts, could I ask which legislators will be here at 3 o'clock?
Yeah, we're going to have Senator James Manning here, Senator Lee Byer, Representative Paul Holvey, Representative Nancy Nathanson, and then we're going to have the legislative director for Representative Julie Fahey.
Okay.
John Lively's out of town, and Senator Przanski's working today.
Got it. I don't have questions. I want to explain something, and I guess my first 4 minutes will provide the context for that. I did not run on a new county courthouse. In fact, Commissioner Bozovic met with me right after the primary and said, go tour the courthouse. You may remember that. And I did. And I agree. Courthouse is old and needs fixing, just like a lot of low-income housing is old and needs fixing, just like a lot of things are old and need fixing. However, after I got the tour and Steve assembled his courthouse leadership team, many of whom are here right now, and I met with them. And we had a lively, and I want to thank, enthusiastic discussion. And that included Devin, and I don't know if Greg's still here, and Alex, and Jim, and Steve. And I explained to them what I ran on, my priorities. My dilemma was, how do we dovetail those because of all the work staff and this Board of Commissioners have done to get us to the point we are right now in a way that builds upon things but is not negative or gets the group off track. And so what I wanted to explain to you, because this is a world that I'm exceedingly familiar with, are municipal projects, commercial and industrial retrofits, the financing for those, and how you organize support for those. And so to me, this is a no-brainer in terms of my world, but it may be new. And that really relates to, and the timer can stop me whenever because these aren't questions. It really relates to something that's tried and true practices in the development and construction industry of how you accrue additional community benefits to the community above and beyond the benefit of the building being built and the uses of the building. And what that relates to is it really relates to including realistic targets for the hire of local contractors and their hire of local employees so we circulate more money in the community, and how we prioritize that so obviously we're not stuck with unqualified contractors or workers. Those kinds of community benefit agreements also discuss greater assurance for large municipal projects that are required to utilize prevailing wage anyway. That provides more assurance that the budget will not only be on target, we won't need all that contingency, which is why I asked the question, simply because prevailing wage is required on municipal projects. Interestingly, in Oregon, more community benefit agreements are attached to private projects. For example, if the Jordan Cove LNG project goes through, there will be a community benefit agreement attached to that. Whereas in California, where I developed, more community benefit agreements were tied to municipal projects because it didn't increase the costs of those projects. It also identifies the training required, the apprenticeship journeyman training required for the workers on those projects. Again, to me, it's a no-brainer. It also identifies or prioritizes contractors that offer health insurance to their employees. And it also enables significant recruitment in order to meet the community hiring goal on these projects amongst those who have historically been excluded from full participation in the local labor market: women, minorities, and veterans. So those are the key components. And in the discussion that I said, now with those elements, I would be hugely supportive, because then we could not just be talking about a courthouse, we could be talking about we could be talking about a vision for Lane County where we will move toward commitments as appropriate to local business and contractors, local hires, inclusion in the workforce, safety and technical standards in training, and et cetera, et cetera. So, in talking with county administrator, it was recommended that I bring this up now, which is the only reason why I talked about the 4 minutes, but that I bring up and request that the board allow me to work more with county staff so that we all could bring something that meets the mustard for staff, that would be kind of the components of some sort of a ordinance or whatever it would look like, that would identify elements of community benefits that this commission also could attach to this project. That's what I wanted to explain, and forgive me, because to me, I've done this time and time again, but I know that this may be new to my peers.
Okay, thank you, and we'll hope to hear more on our second round, okay? All right, next up is Commissioner Buck, followed by Commissioner Farr.
First, I just want to concur with Commissioner Burney that I'm very interested in hearing more about community benefits agreements. But I had a couple of financial questions first. Is there any possibility when, and we may learn more from legislators who are working on this in Salem, but what if they allocate $5 million less than what we estimate they will? You know, do we lop off, a row of offices? Do we not complete a floor? I mean, what if it is close, but not quite enough? And if we write in to the measure that we won't, proceed if we don't get the full amount, what if we're just shy?
Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Buck. So we've definitely been thinking about that as well. And we have been particularly thinking about it as we wrote the ordinance, wrote the draft ordinance, I should say. So we've been thinking about how do we sort of leverage what the voters really valued, which is to ensure that we do take advantage of the state funding, but not paint ourselves into a corner, so that if the legislature allocates, as you said, something a little bit less, we haven't precluded ourselves by writing the code too prescriptively. I think the opportunity is ours to make sure that we do enough effective advocacy to, for example, discuss the scoping study. I think we in particular, amongst the counties that I've seen go through this process, in Salem really have a good case to make that we have been very thoughtful and planful and are educated in terms of where our costs lie. And like I said, I think it's the opportunity is ours to make sure that we are providing the data and the arguments that we think the $87.6 million is an accurate number. Again, as Jim alluded to, we do go through an agreement. In fact, I think we've signed now sort of the first phase of the two authorizations we've gotten thus far with the state of Oregon. So we have agreements for those dollars. Depending on what happens during the session with the language that goes along with the bill, we may get a little bit more of a cushion with respect to those dollars. But it's a very good question, and I think I'm not sure I really have the answer to say, okay, if the state comes in and gives us $5 or $10 million more, what is it that we do? That hasn't been my experience. I mean, I haven't actually seen that happen thus far with the courthouse projects. And again, I think we've got a great case to make that we've really thought this through in something. I mean, now we've had 2 studies from bona fide experts to look at what we think this thing is going to need and to cost. But there's an awful lot of variables. We could, depending on what the economy does, contractors could get more affordable. They maybe could get more expensive too, depending on different things that even the legislature might do.
That brings me to my next question. Although, just to wrap up the first one, I think when we put this language in the measure, it will need to be very clear to our voters. And I may not get to my second question tonight.
You'll get your second question on our next round. Thank you.
I think I should just add that, that, and your point is well taken, that our next challenge, in addition to getting this draft ordinance in front of you, is to put draft ballot measure language, and that'll be something that the board ought to keep their eyes on, is do we paint ourselves into a corner that we'd rather not be painted into if we're too prescriptive? The flip side of that is, if the voter feels like we're being a little too, loosey-goosey with the language and could pull one over on them, we want to avoid that as well. So we've got to find sort of that fine line that really does work with respect to providing some confidence to the voter that what we say we're going to do, we will do. I thought it was terrific yesterday at State of the County when Commissioner Bozovich emphasized, that was what was so unique about our jail levy work, was we didn't do an ordinance in that case, but we did it in the actual order that passed the ballot measure language, and there were a lot of promises that have been kept about making sure that these dollars went into a specific number of beds, that those dollars were audited, that there was very specific charges that were made for that levy ask of the voters.
Okay, Commissioner Farr?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
And for my first 4 minutes, I'll kind of follow Commissioner Berney's lead and talk more in general terms rather than ask specific questions. The first thing I'll say is that, your work to date, Ms. Mokrahajski, and I'll point out, you're the only person I'm the boss of here, so I won't talk to you guys. You can talk to you. Your work to date has convinced me that this is the right thing to do, that we are moving in the right direction, and that we are performing due diligence on all phases of both planning for the construction and for the design and financing of the courthouse. So my questions aren't going to really surround that too much. My questions, as I've mentioned to you all in private, is that we have convincing to do. Now that I am convinced, and I am convinced that this is the right thing to do, how do we make certain that Commissioner Berney, first, is also convinced? And I'm using you figuratively, because you said that you needed to be convinced. And then once Commissioner Berney is convinced, how do we, as a board, perform our role in making certain that the people who we serve are convinced that it does go beyond the simple function, the community benefit goes beyond the simple function of the facility. And that is obviously very important. And Commissioner Berney made some very strong and powerful points that I believe are in the process of being addressed, as far as whether it be prevailing wage or whether it be working with local businesses, whether it makes certain that the building of our facility enhances our economic opportunity as well as the future needs of the community. So that being said, the last big project I was a part of as a board member, my name is on it, Eugene City Library. The one before that was the the regional training facility for the Eugene Springfield Fire Department, which is a large facility on 2nd Avenue as the headquarters. My name is on 2 different plaques on that one. So we've all been a part at some level of planning for whether it be municipal buildings, Prairie Mountain School, Calapooya High School, Meadowview School, all facilities that I've been on the board of when it was planned and constructed. Board members have a very different role. And the Board of County Commissioners is a little bit different of the City Council, and certainly a little different of the school board, but we have a similar role in that we are guiding you on the policies that you move forward with. I don't expect to, want to, or hope anybody on this board will want to get into details of the very specifics of the design, the very specifics of placement, and various down in the weeds issues such as that. I believe that our role is to make sure that once we are convinced that this is the right project, and I am, and it is, then we will support through the information that you give to us, we will make certain that the community hears it in a way that they understand it and the way that they know that it will support the needs of the community. Not just for the future of the courthouse, for the juries, the judges, the inmates, whomever are going to be using the courthouse, but also for the people who build the courthouse. And it really is an opportunity, Commissioner Berney, for us to make a powerful local economy statement.
If I may, I think it's a huge opportunity.
We agree. We agree. So that being said, I will have more questions about the details of construction. I think most of my questions there will come in later phases soon. And we have one of our senators here already, but we'll have another full body of legislators who we'll talk to and make sure that they see the same, the positive benefit. I have no doubt that they will to our community and beyond the simple function of the facility. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussion. I'll listen to the questions. And quite frankly, once again, I am convinced that through your work to date, that we have done due diligence in making certain we're moving the project forward in the correct fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. Your timing is excellent. Thank you.
I thought those were calls coming.
You thought there were calls coming, the timing. Okay, so we are now ready to turn 4 minutes over to Commissioner Bozovich. Thank you. Go ahead.
Let's see if I can do less. Real quick for the newer commissioners, this goes back before 2014. You got a history from 2014 on, but this dates back well before that. There was a statewide study of court facilities and a report done in 2008, which we ended up objecting to the results of because we thought they ranked our building too high as far as the capabilities of it. And part of that re-ranking that was done as far as the court facilities task force was we basically ranked right under Multnomah County as the next one really needing replacement for courthouses. So there's been a lot of work done statewide looking at court facilities. That's why we're at the top of the list and why we feel really confident about our ability to get some of the bonding out of the state. And we'll be talking with the state legislators more about that. But if you want the before 2014 background, I can give you some of that, one-on-one if you need it. I like the idea of the community benefits agreement. Devil's in the details for me. As an engineer that's worked in public contracting for a long time, I'm always concerned about things that might drive project costs up. And I've dealt with them over time, whether it's, percentages for art and projects or wage and laws. I'd like to see what it is. But I'm more than willing to support it because I like the idea. The concept's great. Devil in the details. More than willing to entertain and look at and support. Make it part of the motion if I feel it's something I can support. Just have to be careful about it because as I heard one thing about preferences to contractors that supply health insurance. A lot of contractors nowadays use union halls. The union hall provides the health insurance. Does that count? Just want to understand all that.
Well, my understanding is we'll have more time, right? Drill into those details.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. And actually, I don't think we need to answer that today. I think that can be answered as we're moving ahead with the process of developing the ordinance and all that. I don't need that. You might be able to supply me with some information, some links that I can go look at separately, so I can convince myself that this benefits agreement's an okay thing. Other than that, I think, I've been so deeply involved in the courthouse project, both sitting on AOC's Court Facilities Task Force, on the Court Security Committee that I'm appointed to by the presiding judge, and multiple other places, Facilities Committee and everything. I get it. We need the courthouse. The opportunity to get state matching funds is not something we normally get for a county-level project. And I'd just like to see the project move ahead. So I don't really have any questions because I could probably give the presentation.
Thank you very much. With 52 seconds remaining, appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to take my first 4 minutes and just say a couple things. First of all, I would like to know, not now, but by an email to the board, what the status of the law library is in the new building, if there is one, and if there isn't, because it's a scoping study, I'd like to know that. Secondly, I'd like to know the cost of a voter's pamphlet. I'd like the folks that would produce a voter's pamphlet to give us an estimate of what the voter's pamphlet would cost. And if you have that based upon what other things a county voter's pamphlet would include, including our measure, I'd like to know that broken out from the cost. Another thing is that one of the things that's done in public buildings to tie them to nearby buildings, for example, that detective working on the murder case, and he's across the street, and he's not in the building, but he doesn't really have to be in the building because he's not going to be testifying every day in a murder case. He's going to be working on the murder case, and he doesn't have to testify. They put a sky bridge in. Now, we didn't put a sky bridge in between this building, the public service building, and the state office building, but we did tunnel it to make it possible to go back and forth a little faster. Question, is a sky bridge between the new courthouse and the existing public service building an option? Could it be included or not? Another thing is concerning the community benefit, I'd just like to say that I'm in favor of it working on it. I'm also in favor of if we have some kind of advisory committee or internal committee that's working on it, that we think about appointing a commissioner who has a big interest as a liaison to the committee. So it's not just the idea of a community benefit agreement. It's also some kind of committee that maybe Jim is on, or I'm not sure how many committees there are working on this, so I'll leave that a bit vague. But I do think that having a commissioner that wants to get involved in this, if the board wants to create a liaison kind of role for that, this would be a good time to do it. I also want to say that I want to know, and maybe via email, I want to know from maybe Mr. Kyler, what additional opportunities there might be for the Board of Commissioners to give our perspective on more polling. Are you going to do more polling? Do you have a budget to do more polling? I think you should do more polling. And what is the involvement you want from the Board of Commissioners, if any, in the topics? Because I think when we did the transportation polling, we missed an opportunity to ask questions of the pollster. I think that polling we received turned out to be wildly inaccurate and led us to the view, and I don't know how many of the other people in the room remember this, but our polling showed it would pass, and it was defeated almost 3-1. So that's pretty bad in terms of quality of information. So I realize it's a different polling company, but I would like to see an email about the future of polling and have you send that back to the Board of Commissioners. for further briefing. And last but not least, in my remaining 9 seconds, I think we should have, as I mentioned earlier, more discussion on this, not just today, but also tomorrow after the work session. So looks like I've already eaten up my 4 minutes, so we'll go to another round. And to State Senator Manning, welcome. Sorry for all this, but we're in the middle of our meeting. And of course, as a former Senate assistant, I want to welcome Mrs. LaWanda Manning as well, who's the senator's assistant in many, many ways, but legislative assistant. So, Joe, let's go for another round, 4 full minutes. Go.
Oh, okay. Does our meeting start at 3:30 or 3?
Yep.
Well, I just did want to say, when you were discussing the building was 60 years old and the mechanical and heating, et cetera, weren't up to snuff, sadly, I personally relate to that. The other thing is, just going on that, and by the way, I did want to say that when I developed these projects, it was often the engineers, not water, but electrical and mechanical and structural, that drove up the costs for us quite a bit. But as we move forward with all of that, the other thing I wanted to share with the board about that is, and again, there is no, that I perceive downside, is that what we haven't talked about, and I know we will at a point, is how we get this bond approved. I know polling is one thing. My experience was my opponent polled at 80%, and I polled at 13% 5 months before the election. So I'm not the biggest believer in polling. But the other thing is, how are you going to fund a PAC, right? I mean, at the point where this board decides to move from, yeah, we're going to do it, then we have to be hands-off, is my understanding, or not us as commissioners, but staff, and a PAC needs to be funded. And one thing about, again, the notion, depending upon how we build it, of course, because the devil is in the details, but one is that by law, by code, any new building is going to be energy efficient. It's going to cost a lot less per square foot to heat and cool it. And by state law, my understanding is that, was I told 1.5% of the budget needs to go to renewable energy. And we can exceed that by 1/4 or 0.5%. And then all of a sudden, who are we mobilizing to support a new courthouse, which is part of a vision for a cleaner energy Lane County and a living wage Lane County and a more inclusive workforce Lane County and more health. But that, all of a sudden, that's mobilizing networks of people in the public sector and the private sector, labor and contractors, that already have dollars available that would be very interested in funding a PAC to move forward with the courthouse. And I just wanted to share that there are a multitude of reasons for us to articulate that. And then finally, obviously, not obviously, but I see this as a huge win-win opportunity too. And it's a huge opportunity for us to bring money into the community, not take money out of the community. Those were my only points on this. And I appreciate Commissioner Sorensen. I would, if the board so chose, I would love the opportunity to liaison on with staff and formulate some of the details that we could then bring back to you. I'm done.
Okay, we'll next call on Commissioner Buck, and please take your 4 minutes in this round.
So I have more financial questions. Generally, in my experience of development, cost estimates are typically pretty low compared to the real costs that come in once you have a full design. And vendors have had a chance to complete the RFPs and bring them back. That was one of the reasons why I was very curious in what the contingency was. And if we come in you know, we're estimating 252, and then the actual costs come in much more, do we have enough of a cushion? It would be the first time in my development career that they would come in at target. Can you provide some feedback on that?
Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Book. I've probably been the most involved in this. I can say that having owned a construction company for 25 years and done a lot of CMGC projects, they actually do come in under budget sometimes. In this particular case, the methodology, we used an independent cost estimator, and there are a couple of things that I feel good about with that. First, this is somebody who has worked on the Multnomah County projects and on other courthouse projects and followed along and had data sharing, so has been able to get the learning curve from that. Second, this also anticipates inflation during the construction period, something that is rarely accounted for, and in the case of Multnomah County, wasn't accounted for when they came up with their budgets. So in terms of my personal experience and of what I have seen about the way this budget was developed, I have good confidence in a professional opinion that this is an inclusive budget, and it includes enough that if inflation increases some beyond what's anticipated, which is I think construction inflation of 4% per year, that the project can still be constructed and completed without substantial loss to the quality of the long-term facility.
I think I would feel much more comfortable if I knew what would happen if we did go over budget. What would be the Plan B design if something just out of all of our estimations and progress with legislative committees, if we knew what that Plan B would be if that even occurs. That would just make me feel a lot more comfortable with the cost.
You done for this round?
That's it.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner, that's a brilliant series of questions because, you know, the eventuality that we get delayed. We can't find somebody to do the building and we're a year behind on schedule. Well, you know that drives costs up. That just the delay that sometimes is inherent in sometimes it's caused by government, but sometimes it happens to government. So we have to really bear in mind, and Ms. Malkowski, you said over and over again that this is a, what's the term you use? It's a all-in number. And that we are guaranteeing, or we're confident that we won't go over the number that we're stating. Well, we need to know that for certain. You're right. But beyond that, we've seen the questions in recent weeks that the public wants to know that for certain too. They don't want to fund something, then find out that they funded it part way. Or they don't want to fund something, then find out that we forgot to fund the operation of the building, for instance. So, you know, that's an important part of the due diligence that we're going through, and I do trust staff to provide that information, and I'm glad that you highlighted that. That being said, in addition to large public projects that I've been on boards of, you know, the K through 8 schools and high schools and other things, library, fire halls, I've also been on private projects. When we built the Jerry's store on Highway 99, for instance, it took us a long time to build that, and we had to bear in mind all the things that you're talking about. But it is a little bit different for government, because I think that up front, we are required to really outline all of the contingencies that may happen. When you're building a private project, sometimes optimism gets in the way of reality, and sometimes you hope and think you can do it, even though that's not what you state out loud. And you find that you simply cannot do it. Once again, due diligence in our situation here, I believe, is going to cover that eventuality, and I'm confident in that. Therefore, I'm not going to whip it. You know, I think that's something that will be presented to us. But really, I'll equate this a little bit to the Eugene Public Library, in that we did require some outside funds. We went out for the library twice before we passed. Third time we passed it. And the first 2 times we failed, and we did polling and, you know, all the due diligence ahead of time, and we didn't pass it. But the third time we passed it, we brought together a series of funding mechanisms including, it was including urban renewal dollars, for instance, and including other outside sources and grants. But we had, and Commissioner Burney, you mentioned an outside group that drove the process for us, and that was the Friends of the Eugene Library in this case, who, where we were 8 city councilors plus a mayor, we couldn't get to every single corner of the community to make sure everybody understood and that everybody's questions were answered, so to speak. So the Friends of the Eugene Library put up a great deal of effort and a great deal of money and a great deal of expertise in making sure that people's questions were answered. So I'm confident once again that we will have a process in place that will garner the support of not just the 5 of us. Once the staff cannot whip it anymore, I use that term again, whip it, that we'll have people on our side who are helping us to paint the picture of the project, once again, in terms that people understand and in visions that people understand, so that it's not just a building downtown, it's my building downtown. And it's not just for juries and inmates, it's for me and my family. You know, that's the important thing that we will be doing, is making certain that people's questions regarding the validity of the need is there. And fifth or sixth time I'm saying that I'm confident in staff, confident in the process that we have in place to provide us with due diligence to be able to answer those questions truthfully. Thank you.
Okay, 9 seconds to spare. Thank you so much. And we're ready to go to Commissioner Bozovich. Do you have any further comments, questions?
Touch on a couple of things real quick. First of all, the Skybridge question, you know, that was at first one of the things I thought we might be able to make the new facility smaller by Skybridge and using our existing facilities. As I've been involved in some of the security issues with court facilities, you know, you need to have a secure envelope to that building. So if we're going to Skybridge, then we have to secure the Skybridge, and whatever entrances to the Skybridge have to be secured and part of that secure envelope. So it adds to a whole issue there. Secondly, one of the things that is kind of great about this and bringing the sheriff's office into one facility instead of trying to divide them up and have the transport folks and whatever supervising for the transport over in a courthouse building, putting some of their operations stuff over here at the PSB or the old courthouse building. In addition, we still already have them divided down in the jail facility. You're starting to divide a lot of command staff and have to create redundancy and supervision and support. Moving them into one place adds a bunch of efficiency for the sheriff's operations. So, go ahead, maybe get the question answered about Skybridge, but I've kind of rolled that one through my mind several times, and it was where I started and eliminated it eventually as something that really might make sense to do.
What about as an option into the future?
Well, one of the things we did do purposefully, at least in the blocking diagram and as you saw, the elevation works of how it fits on the block, is put the sheriff's office entranceway directly across from the PSBs. So there could be a mid-block crosswalk and easy access there, whether there's a overhead Skybridge, which was where the old Skybridge used to be, as you're aware, that might have some ability there, but it's still, there gets to be the questions of the secure envelopes of the building and dealing with even the back offices of the sheriff's office are all secure also. There's a public lobby, but we can't walk into the evidence area, or the armory, There's certain things, there's a reason the sheriff's office is secure. And operations and a few other things, emergency operations. So really quickly, the cost estimate, I've been involved in projects for a long time, managed a lot of construction projects, understand your concerns. One of the things that the direction was with the estimators was, we want to see the top end. We don't want to see you leaving something off or anything like that. If you look at that, there's $60 million that's built in project associated costs, soft costs, from design to permit fees and all of those contingencies. So the objective is that $252 million is, and including all the inflation work we've done trying to get there, that's really an attempt to say we're never going to go over this. So I appreciate the concern about going over, but I really have pretty strong confidence that we can come under on that. Just knowing and having been involved as the liaison to the court group so far, that was the direction on the cost estimate. I want to touch real quick on polling. We're at the point where if we do go to a ballot measure or adopt, or start moving towards a ballot measure adoption and place it on the ballot, at that point, we can't do the polling. The PAC could do polling. You know, so the timing for the staff to actually develop and put out any additional polling between the deadline for us to place this on the ballot is pretty slim. So.
What is
I was
that,
timing
what is
myself.
that deadline?
When do we have to actually place it on the ballot?
March 1st.
I mean, when do we have to complete board action to place it on the ballot?
We have, I think it's February 19th is the last,
That's a down week. February.
excuse me, yeah, February 12th is the
Yeah,
last day.
so we'll be taking action to put, once we've voted to place it on the ballot, staff can't take any action. So February 12th, between now and February 12th to put a poll out, not likely to happen.
Conceivably, you do have the week of February 26th, that's the week we're
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give myself the final 4 minutes on this round, and then we can decide how much more we want to go before we probably should break for a little bit before our guests come. So here's a couple more comments from me and questions. In this revenue picture where we're trying to figure out where the money's coming from, not where it's going, but where it's coming from, we have been presented with a slide that showed two basic sources. One I would call the voter-approved bond, and the other I'll call the state money. Is there any capital money that the county is putting up out of the overall Lane County capital improvement plan for this?
We are exploring that and trying to identify, we have set aside some additional one-time funds that we've received, particularly in last year's budget, or in the course of the last year and a half, into a capital construction courthouse fund. Yeah, it's not significant. I mean, this was part of the unanticipated secure rural schools funding from the federal government, unanticipated PILT funding.
So you're looking into it?
Yes, we are looking into it, and we are committed
Yeah.
to doing everything we can to, if we can bring down even slightly that $158 million local need, even slightly, we want to be able to do that so that we're demonstrating we're putting everything we can towards it
Okay,
without.
that increase, that relates to my second question, which is, for purposes of polling, have we polled the question of whether we are asking the voters to approve $158 million in bonding, as opposed to what we were told, which is that we were asked to, whether voters were asked if they would support a 29 cents per thousand, so that the public is more fully informed on what the level of the bond is and the amount of money that the county government is obligated to repay with interest on the bond, in a kind of an effort to find this transparency that all the commissioners have been asked about, I'm sure. And, oh, sure, it's just 250 million. Well, actually, no, it's 252 million. Oh, well, there again, I was told it was just 250. Well, we didn't tell you that. That was reported by a newspaper that we today designated a newspaper of record. So, you know, what I'm saying is that, have you done polling specifically to ask about the amount of money that you as a Lane County voter are authorizing the county to borrow, $158 million?
Commissioner Sorensen, we did that because with a bond measure, you do have to, in the ballot measure language, requires you to state the amount of the bond. Not, I mean, you can put the cents per thousand in the summary, but in the actual question.
You polled 150.
We polled 150.
Okay,
There were both numbers were in the poll.
both numbers, okay.
Right, we
'cause
included the 94 million because we asked people, this is not knowing that we're going to get 94 million
good.
in the 150.
Okay. And in my remaining 42 seconds, I'll just say, I'm very interested in two more things. One, I really think we need to do the voters pamphlet. I mean, I asked the question, what's it gonna cost? But I really think we should do the voters pamphlet, again, as part of the transparency. People will see what we believe is the facts about it. They'll see the commissioners have put it on the ballot, but they will also see that we have provided for a voters pamphlet so that people who support it can advocate, and people that oppose it can oppose it. My other question is, do we have any data, and maybe Mr. Kyler can give us this. Yeah, see, prerogative of chair. Mr. Kyler may be able to give this to us, and that is there any national survey data where courts have asked their patrons what they like or dislike about their court? And, you know, the things that people are happy or sad about, and I'm not just talking about the inmates, I'm talking about the people that are in the court. And is there any survey data that other people have paid for? And if there isn't, I'm happy to live with that answer, but it seems like a lot of people want to know these days how their customers are doing, and I won't expect you to answer within my now expired 4 minutes, but.
Well,
that's just an
we
issue.
certainly can inquire on that. We had a couple staff, I think you were included as well as Mr. Rickoff participated in a web conference, one of the presenter around ballot initiatives, local funding for courthouse projects. Johnson County, Kansas, the former administrator there is a friend of mine and was out here recently visiting and touring some of our services. And so they did a presentation on that, so we certainly could request their polling information. Do you have anything to
Well, the one thing, Chair Sorensen, the one other thing, I wasn't involved with the NCSC study, but one of the things when we contracted with the NCSC, they're a nonprofit organization that involves courts nationally. My understanding from reading that study is that they have a lot of data on how people interact with courts and what that is, and that was incorporated in this. I do think that we can probably get some information from DLR Group, because there are like 3 or 4 national consulting firms on courthouses, and I think that probably Todd Orr, the architect that presented to you, probably has a lot of data, and I can inquire for some more of that.
Well, thank you, and I think what we'll do is we'll just have a recess while staff figures out where the senators and representatives might sit. So we'll be in recess till 3:30. Judge Vogt. Could you come up to the place that says your name there, Judge Vogt? And then we have Representative Wilde and Catherine Ryan, the Legislative Director for
Representative Fahey.
Representative Fahey, thank you. We have Senator James Manning. Of course, we have our 5 Lane County Commissioners coming around the table. Commissioner Farr, Commissioner Buck, Commissioner Burney, Commissioner Bozovich. And we first wanted to welcome all of you for coming. I know we'll have other people coming as well. We'll introduce them as they come in. I just wanted to, first of all, say that we are here to, first and foremost, thank the members of the Oregon Legislative Assembly and staff and all assembled for the $1.4 million that Lane County has received from the people of Oregon through the work of our legislative delegation. That was in 2016. In 2017, we received a much larger amount, $5 million. So we received $6.4 million towards this project. And it is really important for us to update you on not only how we've used that money, but also on the shared partnership that Lane County, and for that matter, all counties in Oregon have with the state concerning the construction of courthouses and the pending requests by the governor to fund the state courts in the state of Oregon. I want to, besides thanking you and acknowledging your help for us and work, I also want to make sure that you have an opportunity to hear our project status and to answer any questions you have. And I guess I will turn this over now to our County Administrator, Steve Mokrahysky, who will give that briefing, and then we'll ask maybe by seniority. And Representative Holvey is coming in. Please join us at the table, Paul. And Paul, I just wanted to say we started this meeting thanking the legislature for the $6.4 million that the county's already received on the courthouse project. So we'll first hear from Mr. Mokrahysky, our county administrator, on the project and the video, and then after that you can be asking questions of us about the project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, and to our representatives, senators, representatives, and staff. Thank you again for taking the time to be with us today. What we'd like to do is just provide a little bit of historical context about our work to date regarding a new Lane County courthouse. We'll share with you a brief video that we have that articulates some of the challenges we're facing with our courthouse. We'll talk about current status, where we're at, results from a recent voter survey that was conducted in November, December of 2018, as well as our schedule moving forward into the spring with this effort, and then allow for questions. So we're going to try to keep our presentation to around 20 minutes so we have enough time here for all of you to ask questions and to engage in conversation. So going back to 2014, the Association of Oregon Counties, in collaboration with the Oregon Judicial Department and the Chief Justice of the Oregon Supreme Court, developed a task force to prioritize courthouse projects and identify the most viable projects. In July of 2015, Lane County formally entered the queue of prioritized projects. And then later in 2015, the county formally engaged the National Center for State Courts. This was our first effort to analyze truly what was needed in a new county courthouse for Lane County. We received estimates for square footage and some rough cost estimates for that project. That work really helped inform the reality that the county-owned Butterfly lot was not going to be an adequate location for a new county courthouse given the size of the new facility that we would need, and really informed our discussions moving forward with the city of Eugene.
Steve, I'll just interrupt you briefly to welcome Senator Beyer and Representative Nathanson. And we just started with Steve's briefing, and after that briefing, we'd like to invite all the legislators to ask questions if you have any.
Thank you. So just with a brief recap of history on this project, National Center for State Courts completed its analysis in May of 2016. That really helped us, again, inform our work with the City of Eugene in identifying appropriate locations for a future Lane County Courthouse, as well as a future City Hall and Farmers Market in downtown Eugene. During the 2016 legislative session, the Oregon Legislature and really our delegation from Lane County led the effort to approve an initial $1.4 million in bond funding authorization for planning of a Lane County Courthouse. During the 2017 legislative session, the legislature and our delegation approved a second bond funding authorization of $5 million for pre-construction development. So 1.4 plus 5 million, the legislature has now approved and authorized up to $6.4 million in bond funding for the project. During 2017 and 18, and with the information that was provided through the National Center for State Courts analysis, we collaboratively worked with the City of Eugene to examine downtown development projects, again, with an eye towards placemaking. What is the highest and best use of these public properties, given the need for public facilities, both the City of Eugene and Lane County? A lot of work happened there, various joint meetings between the Board of Commissioners and the City Council. That has ultimately led to and concluded with a jointly negotiated purchase and sale agreement to transfer those two properties. So the City of Eugene has agreed to sell its former City Hall block to Lane County, and the county has agreed to sell the Butterfly lot to the City of Eugene. We're nearing completion of that, and we expect that by the end of January, those documents will be executed. Both governing bodies have approved the final execution of those documents. They're just going through final legal review. In August of 2018, Lane County engaged Robertson Sherwood Architects, a local architecture firm here in Lane County, along with DLR Group out of the Portland area, and that they are a national expert in courthouse design and analysis work, to undertake a scoping study to review the National Center for State Courts analysis that was done in 2015 and completed in 2016. To verify those numbers, to dive deeper into square footage needs, massing, and stacking of the facility, and really to validate that the former City Hall block would be an adequate location for a future Lane County Courthouse. And so we will present a high-level overview to you of that scoping study. We also engaged with JMB Consulting to develop conceptual cost estimates for the project that were based on the results of that scoping study. In December 2018, Oregon Governor Kate Brown released her recommended budget, and that budget refers to Lane County's courthouse project, which is included in the Chief Justice's budget. I think, as we all know, there's approximately $145.5 million in Oregon Courthouse Capital Construction Improvement Fund bond funding in the next biennium, and that includes Lane County's request of $87.6 million. So again, a brief recap there of where we're at. What we'd like to do is share with you a video. It's about 4 minutes long, and this was played yesterday at our State of the County, so some of you have seen it already and appreciate your indulgence in, but you'll hear from several of the officials that actively utilize this facility on the challenges that we're facing, and then we'll start talking about solutions that we've identified to move forward.
The courthouse, as far as a big picture for our community, deals with the heart of every person and their constitutional rights. We handle every case from traffic tickets up to murders. We handle everything involving juvenile court and family law, car accidents, personal injury matters. We're the everything court in Oregon. The space limitations of the courthouse affect the public because it delays things. Right now, the Lane County Courthouse has 15 courtrooms. We process over 33,000 cases in the Lane County Circuit Court every year. It's causing delays and inefficiencies that are costing our taxpayers money every single day. The problem that we have also with space is we don't have any separation.
We don't have space within the courtrooms where attorneys can meet with their clients.
The only thing that the court can really do is take an entire recess, empty the room, and set up a place right there in the courtroom where you can talk to your attorney without anyone there. To do an entire shutdown of a courtroom for somebody to have a 5-minute conversation with their attorney ends up taking more like 40 minutes.
On average, our protective order clinic each year helps anywhere from 2,200 to 2,500 petitioners who are filing for civil orders of protection.
Victim Services Division has on any given Monday 15 people coming in to get restraining orders.
There's not a lot of private places where we can have one-on-one. It's not really ideal.
It's very likely that a victim or a witness standing outside of a courtroom waiting for court proceedings might see the defendant or the inmate being led through the public space to get into the courtroom.
Part of the thing about being a judge is you need to make sure that the information you're getting in a courtroom is true and accurate. And you can't get that if people are afraid to even come into the building.
There's only one elevator available to move inmates.
There are no separate entrances or exits to this building to be able to keep the parties apart during those very volatile times.
This courthouse does not have access for a large portion of our community to participate in all the ways our community needs to participate. If they are in a wheelchair, they have to go outside of the building and come back into the building so that they can avoid the half set of stairs on that first floor landing to get to security. We don't have a juror box in the building that could be easily accessed with, for instance, a walker or a wheelchair or anything of that nature. There are stairs and doorways that are not compliant. Getting around the building for someone with challenges is nearly impossible.
Because of the way the building is designed, we can't create more space. We've done a terrific job of managing within what we have.
We don't know what kind of maintenance problem we're walking into every day in this building, but normally there is something.
We've had a recurring problem where the sewage in the courthouse backs up to the point where raw sewage ends up coming through the ceiling tiles and saturates their office space. Similarly, we've had that happen to our property and evidence room.
Our elevators are so old that when they go down, we've had to shut down the entire elevator for 2 to 3 weeks. When it happens in public elevators, which some days we have come in and both public elevators have been not functioning, then that just shuts down the entire courthouse. And that's happened.
These courtrooms are not designed for the technology that we have today. Every case involves some kind of technology to present it to the jury or to the judge.
We could do so much more to serve the courts in a more efficient manner if we had a more efficient building.
Having more secure areas where we can provide the services that we need to, I think would be huge.
Alex is just going to share some comments about the governor's budget.
Right, and so, as the delegation knows, you know, the courthouse projects are mentioned in the governor's recommended budget. Obviously, the Chief Justice's budget is a separate document. She has recommended $145 million for courthouse projects, including in Lane, Clackamas, Hood River, Benton, and Lynn counties. Ours is the largest ask of that, and that ask is a little bit larger by about $35 million from last biennium. And we feel like our project is following the pattern. Maybe not, we're not quite sure there's a best practice yet with respect to building courthouses, but certainly the pattern has been a couple of smaller planning asks followed by sort of the larger construction ask, and that's the pattern we're in. The outlier to that is you do have Clackamas that's looking for sort of a larger tranche up front, followed by a second tranche in the coming biennium. And, you know, I think that we're working closely with Clackamas. Representative Nathanson knows that we worked with them to develop some language during the interim that we're seeking during the session. But I think it's worth it to sort of consider how they're going about their project versus how we're going about ours, and at some point in time, sort of having an evaluation about which is sort of best public policy may be well to keep in mind as we move forward.
So I'd like to, we're going to fly through a few slides regarding the scoping study. There may be more detail in here than you may need to know, but we wanted you just to understand this most recent work that we've done with our local architects and the DLR group that has helped inform our most recent cost estimates. The goals and objectives, I think you saw some of this in the video. Safety and security concerns, the need for efficient and accessible courts and services, right-sizing our spaces to make sure that we have spaces that are adequate for needs, creating a welcoming and customer service-oriented facility, and utilizing operational best practices for a courthouse facility. The process that was conducted most recently with our consultants included facility tours and working with individuals and stakeholders that operate within the courts, again, to really drill down into site specifications and standards and needs for the new facility. These were some of the findings that were identified. The need really to have separate circulation areas for the public, for private parties, and secure spaces for inmates and offenders that are moving through the facility. We are moving from a current courthouse that has 15 courtrooms to a proposed new courthouse that has 18 courtrooms. We'll show you a design or a layout of a potential future courtroom and how that will accommodate much of the changes that have occurred over the course of the past 60 years in the judicial system. So ensuring ADA compliance, adequate technology, multiple case types, and the many challenges that we face with our jury services will all be accommodated in the new facility. Dispute resolution suite and mediation space, a lot of the challenges we face, the judge can talk at greater length and with greater authority than I can about this, really the lack of space that we have for individuals, for victims and families and others to have private space with which to confer with their counsel. The need also for our sheriff's office to have operational efficiency and things like our emergency operations center that is in the old or the existing courthouse that has seismic issues, secure facilities for equipment that the sheriff's office needs, as well as our dispatch operation. The DA's office would be accommodated in the new facility and increase our operational efficiency and public access through a new grand jury suite and co-location with the Family Law Division. And then we also have space that would accommodate state programs, including the public defender's operation. So this gives you a look at what a new courtroom would look like. And all of this area can be removed. So this is a jury box that is flexible and can be moved out. And a lot of what we're trying to do is create courtrooms that have flexible space so they can both accommodate a jury trial as well as accommodate our specialty courts. We've had great success in partnership with our state partners and funding from the state with our drug court, our mental health court, our veterans court, and these alternative specialty courts, and moving individuals from the correction system and through our public safety system into more permanent solutions. So flexible courtrooms, we also have private spaces, conference rooms for attorney-client conference back here, and the courtrooms would accommodate these walls being removed so that for those specialty courts that need to accommodate larger groups of people, that you really have these rooms that can expand and contract based on what the need is. Really importantly, in this pink shaded area is our holding area, these secure intake areas. So you would have a secure intake in the lower underground level of the new courthouse that would allow for secured elevator for inmates, a direct access into the courtroom, and all of this is isolated from a connection to victims and the public. So this is how, again, we have not done design of the facility, but this is massing, stacking, and layout of how a new courthouse can function and maximize operational efficiency of all of these areas. This gives you an idea of a breakdown of the various functions within a new courthouse and the total square footage estimate, which is just shy of 300,000 square feet. You see public facilities, courtrooms and chambers, court administration, the district attorney, sheriff transport, sheriff main office, parole and probation, state offices, including the public defender, and secure parking, all in this facility. So again, just shy of 300,000 square feet. This is the project site in downtown Eugene. You see where we sit currently is somewhere like right here. Am I right there? Actually, right here. Here's Harris Hall, and here's the Free Speech Plaza, and this is the current courthouse, the county-owned Butterfly lot, and this is the project site that's being proposed, the city-owned former City Hall block. This is the stacking diagram. So it shows you a 7-story facility, and you see two public. This is 8th Street, 7th Street, Pearl, and High. Again, here we are in Harris Hall right now, the current courthouse, the public service building. The pink shaded 2-story building is the sheriff's office. This is a separate public entrance into the sheriff's office that is non-secure. And here you have a 7-story courthouse with a second public entrance, a secured entrance. Here you have administration and public lobby area on the ground level, and then courtrooms. Surface parking as well as some underground parking, and the possibility for a future parking structure to be developed. And then I think finally, here this shows you floor by floor what we have. So building systems, building support, and then courtrooms in this portion of the facility. That's everything there. And then we have our last set of slides here for you.
We, staff went to the board on December 18th, and again, just before this meeting, because as you know, we've had a change in membership of the board, we did feel the need to really get the conversation started with the board, because, as you know, we'll be the first courthouse project in Oregon to require a public or a local election for a share of the funding. Multnomah County had reserves sufficient to build their courthouse in addition to the state funds. Lane County does not. And so we want to talk to you a little bit about some of the polling and the calendaring for the election that we went over with the board.
This is what we want to start with, is the cost estimates. So first on the expenditure side, and this is, again, as a result of the scoping study that was just completed, the land purchase, $5.4 million, construction costs of $180.1 million, and associated project costs of $66.5. So we've called this our all-in budget. One of the, that I didn't mention, back in 2017, we had developed a project charter for this project, and 4 values for this effort that we have committed to and continue to commit to: accountability, collaboration, transparency, and stewardship. And so in an effort to really be transparent about this effort, we've wanted to say, not want to come to the board and to our legislative delegation and say, well, here's just the construction cost, or here's the land piece. So the overall project cost is estimated at $252 million. It includes all of these components, and we're making the commitment that the project will not exceed that total cost. Our goal, of course, is to come below that cost, but we're making the commitment that it will not exceed that cost. From the revenue standpoint, we have 2 sources of revenue. The proposed state funding of $94 million. That includes the $87.6 million in the Chief Justice's budget and noted in the governor's budget, along with the $5 million and the $1.4 million that have already been authorized. And then a local funding need of $158 million. We have, and continue to look at existing one-time resources that may be available or become available to the county to reduce this $158 million potential request of our local voters, but that's where we stand currently. And so we conducted a frequent voter poll between November and December, November 26th and December 8th of 2018. This was for voters that had voted in 3 of 4 or 4 of 4 of the most recent elections. The margin of error for the survey is plus or minus 5% with a 95% confidence level. We tested the $158 million local need, which equates to 28 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. And we shared in that survey what the impact would be on, I believe, the median household in Lane County. We also tested priorities around the issues faced in the courthouse. As we structured it, the first question asked was, would you support, without any other information, would you support $158 million 20-year bond at 29 cents per thousand would have this impact on your average voter? And when asked that initial raw question, frequent voters, 47% favored the proposal, 44% opposed, 9% were unsure. Then we went through a list of values and things that that we've already shared with you that we're intending to solve through this effort. Things like ADA accessibility and matching state funding and improving safety and security and private spaces for victims and private parties. And after going through all of those things and asking frequent voters whether or not they valued those things, and then asked the same question, 53% favored the measure, 43% were opposed, and 4% were unsure. So you see it swayed largely a good chunk of the 9% unsure. The two aspects that were most compelling in the survey to frequent voters in Lane County, 63% of respondents favored a measure if Lane County said that it would only collect the local portion, the up to $158 million, if the state allocated funding. So if the county committed that it would not collect that funding if the state did not allocate it, they found that to be a favorable proposal. 61% of respondents favored the measure if Lane County received up to $94 million in state funding. So it's clear that voters are compelled by the state support for this effort. The other aspects that were very compelling to voters in Lane County was providing accessibility to all, making sure that people with disabilities, that we had adequate access for everybody. 62% favored that component. 61% of respondents favored addressing the safety and security improvements, including the separation of space for victims and the public. 61% supported strengthening specialty courts, including the Veterans Court, and 59% were compelled by the reality that it's been 60 years since we've had a new courthouse. We have over 600 individuals per day and 33,000 cases per year that go through the courthouse. So this gives you an idea of what resonates with our voters here in Lane County. I'm going to turn it over to Alex to walk through briefly our proposed schedule for an election process and the legislative process.
So again, we will be the first courthouse under this program to have to go out to local voters. Our polling indicated that there was a lot of importance given to making sure that Lane County would not be able to issue a local bond unless we were assured that the state came in with its dollars. And so what we've proposed to the board is an election calendar that includes a couple of different elements. Obviously, there's a ballot measure question, which is the title, which is the question, the caption, the question, and the summary. We've got a couple of meetings scheduled to have that reviewed, including public comment. And then we've also been working to develop an ordinance that would be part of Lane Code that would limit the ability of the county to issue a local bond unless the state were also able to authorize funding. And so our local process under state laws those laws have to be read a couple times. And so you can see our calendar actually starts next week with the first reading of a draft ordinance that would do that, followed by a second reading and public hearing on the 29th, where we would also introduce the first iteration of ballot measure language. The board will be discussing voter information and how to distribute that, whether it's through a state voters pamphlet type document or whether it's just a voter information brochure. And then we get down to really the deadline, which is we have to submit that to the clerk by March 4th. And so our available dates for meetings are here, and you can see we're really trying to wrap this up by the middle of February to meet the deadlines for March 1st.
That's all we have, and Presiding Judge, I don't know if you had any additional comments you wanted to make.
Yeah, we'd like to invite Judge Vogt, who's been very integral to this whole process right from the beginning, to make some comments because she's been following, obviously, the court budget very closely. Welcome.
Thank you. So I don't want to repeat what you've already heard, okay? And I know that you've all been exposed to the Chief Justice's budget proposal. But one thing that I thought was important that maybe you haven't heard is this is our Lane County delegation, and I don't know that anybody's kind of broken down some of what the Lane County part of some of that is. And I thought that might be important for you. You know, the Chief Justice's budget recommendation, she has certain goals that she set out in her budget recommendation, including, you know, a further decline, preventing further decline of court services, because that's a big concern right now, providing timely justice, providing safe and secure courthouses, which is really what we're talking about here today, and supporting recruitment and retention of high-quality lawyers to the bench. And so those are her goals, but when you break down those goals, some of the numbers that they've given to everyone, I think, have been statewide numbers, right? So Lane County numbers on some of those I thought you might be interested in. We do have over 33,000 cases filed each year. I just got our numbers for 18, and it is over 33,000. Again, we had a dip. It was back in 13, I think, and that was because of the loss of our sheriff's traffic team. And so the dip that we had from 37 down to 33 was because of that loss, and it was really in violations. But otherwise, we have stayed steady at over 33,000 in Lane County ever since then. We had in 2018 electronic filings of 127,000 electronic filings. There are 15 of us, by the way. We have a lot of vulnerable citizens in Lane County that we have a lot of cases going on, and when you break those vulnerable citizens down, Lane County Circuit Court oversees $77 million in conservatorship assets. We also have right now 1,539 open child welfare cases in this county, 760 open adult guardianships in this county, 1,732 abuse prevention and protection orders that were issued in 2018. We obviously are concerned about the fact that people are having trouble getting into our building, accessing our building, and getting the services that they really need. And around the state, believe it or not, because of the budgets, there are only 3 courts that are open all day, 8 to 5 for the public. And in our county, we believe that it is our job to be open to the public from 8 to 5. We need that for the people, and so we are one of those 3. That does mean that we have potentially suffered in some other areas so that we could keep our doors open every single day from 8 to 5. But with the numbers of people we're dealing with and the building that's falling down around us, it's becoming increasingly difficult. So I just thought some of those Lane County numbers would be important to this group of people.
And I think you can see, I mean, I hope you can tell, but the partnership that we've developed with the court over the last several years really has just been remarkable. We've got, Steve didn't really get into it, but we do have a whole formal framework around the work that we've been doing. And we've got a number of folks in the room who have been involved with us. We've got a finance team. We've got a good relationship with the courts. We've been meeting with not only the presiding judge, but the individual judges. You know, I think we are really doing things the right way on this project, and I hope you can see it as well. And we would love to hear any questions that you might have about our efforts. We're looking forward to working with you during the coming session. As I indicated, we do have a measure that we'd like to advance that does involve a little bit, so a couple minor changes from what Multnomah County got for their bond issuance. But we're really looking forward to getting up to Salem and working on showcasing this project to the entire body up there.
I did write out those numbers and graph those Lane County numbers. If anybody's interested, I did bring a handout. If you'd like that, yes, right there. My trial court administrator brought those. It's a front and back.
So I think, Judge, would you be open now, and Mr. Mulcahy, for questions and comments from the legislators? I don't know, I'll ask Senator Beyer, is there some kind of protocol of who goes first, or?
We might want to ask the chair of the Capital Construction Committee.
So there is a good method to determine who goes first. Okay, so Paul, Representative Holvey.
And Nancy had the knowledge.
Yeah, Nancy, go ahead. I don't know, who's going ahead?
It doesn't really matter. I'm curious about how do you foresee the timeline, and I might have missed it, for actual, putting out a request for proposals on the architectural and construction services. Where do you see that happening? Or when do you see that happening?
After we secure funding, so not before May of 2019 for sure. And I want to invite Jim Cheney up. Can you come up, Jim? And we'll give you a microphone. Jim is our
You can use my chair right here. Go ahead.
you just need to get to a mic.
We need to get you on the tape.
Jim is our Assistant County Counsel, and he has been our interim capital projects manager as we've been in transition with that position. So he's also has a background in construction. So
Oh, really? I'm a retired carpenter. I used to work with Paul. Anyway, so far as our timeline from here on out, actually what we're anticipating is issuing a request for proposals for architects that would happen probably late February, early of March this year, so we can get a jump on this. One of the things that I'm sure you know that if presuming that we approve, that the voters approve a bond measure, and we sell those bonds, of course, they can't be placed in an interest-bearing account. So that means that every day, if there's inflation, every day the money's worth a little less than it was the day before. So we want to be ready to hit the ground running, to have gone through an architect selection process and agreed on a contract. So basically, the day after that election, that we can have those folks under contract, because that's when we'll know we'll have enough money to pay them, get them started. We would anticipate selecting a contractor under a CMGC method that would occur after that, before the fall. And we would probably look at some early work as early as late in 2019, starting work in the beginning of 2020 and completing in early 2023 with commissioning and occupancy.
Answered my question. Thank you, Jim.
It's going to be an exciting May, I think, Representative.
So
Should be.
maybe Representative Nathanson can ask some questions or make some comments.
I wanted to, preface it with a few comments, because a few of you here are aware of it, but the rest of you aren't. I just texted my staff to find the date. I have in front of me the newsletter that I sent out in July 2008. a picture of me with Judge Mary Ann Bearden standing here discussing the terrible condition of the courthouse. So, for me, it started more than 10 years ago, and like, we're finally here at this point. And then subsequent to that, I was appointed to a committee in the legislature that oversaw the preparation of that report, where we had the third-party evaluation of county courthouses in all 36 counties with the totally third-party, nonpartisan, expert professional review of all of these courthouses and the horrible deficiencies. So all of this has been validated by outside experts, and we've known about it for a long time. So it is time to address the issue. There are two things I wonder if you could address just very briefly. The numbers, what you need, does that include equipment and furnishings? Because that became an issue for a previous project that the legislature had to deal with.
Really large.
And the answer is yes to that question.
So that's included?
It is.
Okay.
We have been invited to learn from some mistakes of others, and we are taking advantage of that as much as we possibly can.
And there is, in the slide presentation, there is a distinction between what I might call the hard versus the softer. And so that is part of the reason why the total number is so large.
That's in the, if you can see the construction costs and in the associated project costs includes FF&E and contingency, inflation cost. Jim, you mentioned a 4% annual inflationary cost. Understanding that, we built the estimates today, but we're not going to actually go out to bid in construction for a period of time. So all of that has been built into the associated project costs.
Representative Nathanson, I might add, that Steve has been driving us really hard since the beginning that he wants to have one number, and that number is the not to exceed number. And again, we've seen some other local projects where these costs continue to go up, and that was a model we just did not want to follow. So we're trying to lay the bar high, and if we can, we'll go below that.
And then my other question is, you're increasing the number of courtrooms. How is it you determine how many courtrooms you need and how you use them, and you need time for moving things in and out and scheduling? But we also know that there's a pressure from some counties, at least, to increase the number of judges. And then that has an ongoing impact on the budget.
And so the National Center for State Court Study that kind of started this, it actually jumped, it projected for us out 50 years, okay? That was 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
16.
In 16. And that brought us up to 17 judges. We have 15 now. That added 2. We now have gone up one more because of, for this county particularly, the juvenile dependency work. We are swamped with juvenile dependency work, and we have lots of legislative mandates about judgments and reviews and how to keep that work going on the schedule it's legally required to go. We, right now, in the budget for the Chief Justice, there are, I think, 14 more judges statewide that she is predicting that we need. She has predicted 2 of those for Lane County because of our juvenile dependency work. And so it comes from that report and the fact that that work has gone up. And the need has become greater with that work because of our need to be not more efficient with that work, but actually more careful with that work, frankly.
Yeah.
And so when the study happened, it was actually 17 judges. We need a courtroom for everybody to work in. Right now, every day, I'm juggling judges, the courtrooms, what they can fit, what they can't fit, because I don't have the flexibility that's been designed here. So I moved one judge to a different floor today because he couldn't try a case on the second floor. He had to try it on the third floor. I mean, these kinds of things. So we're trying to make flexible courtrooms so every judge has a courtroom that they can do everything in. And so we did up that prediction by one at this point in time. And we're hoping for a 100-year building. You know, that would be the goal. They were predicting it out for us for 60, weren't they? 55.
Operationally, yeah, but we're going to build a 100-year building. It'll last 100 years.
So you're assuming that people won't be appearing by hologram in 30 years?
I don't know. We have several people appear by video teleconferencing now. You never know. They still have to have the space to do it.
Just to follow up with Representative Nathanson's question, and it's good to hear that, you know, you've obviously looked at these projections going forward, but it sort of caught my eye that 18, I'm going, well, that's not a very big jump for the next 60 years. I mean, are you sure? I mean, is there adequate space, you know, to increase the number of courtrooms in this building in the future?
One, just if I could respond briefly, one aspect that we have that some other counties don't have is that we are lucky enough to have the Sherbu Center, and we have 2 courtrooms there. And so, and that's where our juvenile dependency work is going on now, but we now have a lot of cases that have to be consolidated. The juvenile work is consolidated with other family law cases that would go on downtown. So we have judges who are going back and forth depending on the type of juvenile case they're working on. So we have 2 other courtrooms in this county that a lot of people, a lot of other counties don't have access to. And that's where all of our juvenile work goes on right now. I think it could, I think that I would tend to agree that you want to build enough so it is a 100-year building. And, you know, if it was up to me, I would say we probably should have 20. But trying to balance everything that we need to get a 100-year building, and we have the Sherbu Center, I think this is where we landed.
And again, just to say,
Not advocating for a bigger project necessarily that requires more bonding, but it was just generally, it just kind of occurred to me that, boy, I hope you've got enough growth figured into this building.
I just heard the co-chairing question.
Steve, when we build the new courthouse, what are you going to do with the current one?
good question. Within the purchase and sale agreement with the city of Eugene, the city will have an option to purchase or lease that facility, to either renovate it and occupy it or do something else and they're considering, and I forget what the time period is it a five years after we vacate the building, the city has an option to purchase or lease that facility as a potential phase 2 city hall. Again, they have contemplated and are moving forward with the design and construction of a new city hall at the north end of the Butterfly lot, and so you see this proximity between a future city hall and the current courthouse as a second phase. The city also has a number of city operations that are dispersed throughout the downtown area in private leases, private buildings through leases, so they've had a desire to consolidate all of those functions into a more central location. We also, I have regular conversations with the Eugene city manager about this building, the public service building, truly being a city-county building, that this, you know, our residents don't distinguish oftentimes between city and county services. They just want to come access what they want to access, and they'd like to have a one-stop shop to the extent that that's possible. So we also have thought about, you know, the current courthouse and the public service building being combined city-county services that are truly public services where the public is coming to get permits or marriage licenses or deeds or pay their taxes or turn in their election ballot. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for that to be considered for consolidated public services. If the city does not, I'll just follow that up with, if the city does not execute that option, then there's always the option for us to consolidate additional Lane County services in that facility. So the building can be occupied. It needs investment. It cannot function as a courthouse. We've resolved that question. It just is not adequate space for all the reasons that you've seen, but it could be occupied for other services. And we have needs certainly in the area of parole and probation. We'd like to relocate our elections operation down here, so there are a lot of things. I think we've envisioned it largely for either city or county public services.
Okay, Senator Byer, do you have any more questions? Okay, Senator Manning?
Just one, the question about the funding. You had mentioned the Chief Justice budget. I'm caught a little bit off guard. I thought that we were doing something that was totally separate, but, you know, now I'm understanding that this is going to be included in the Chief Justice budget, or were there two? Because we started off specifically for Lane County. So how did that work out? I'm not sure. I missed something.
I'll take a shot at this, and we've got plenty of other people, but as I begin to understand the way this is working, the legislature has received a recommendation from the Chief Justice to set aside $145 million in the current, when the future biennium, July 1 biennium, and of that $145 million, $87.6 million is recommended for this project in Eugene, this Lane County Courthouse project. But that would not be enough to build the project because the state is only funding certain court-connected, state court-connected issues. And so, for example, some of the sheriff's office money could not be paid. We couldn't use the 87.6 million for that. So that's why there's a local component and a state component.
And Senator, just in terms of process in Salem, the Public Safety Subcommittee will hear the Judicial Department's budget. And so it appears like any other agency really, but it is, because of its, it's a separate branch, it just comes into the process as a separate document. So like I said, when you read the governor's budget, you sort of see the Chief Justice's budget, but it's not as detailed as the actual Chief Justice's budget document, which is a separate document.
Senator, consideration of it by the legislature is the same as the governor's. It's their recommendation or wish list. It's our job to approve the budget.
So I'll be hearing this again then.
Huh?
So you can add to that, you can subtract from that, and as Senator Byer pointed out, it is the legislative job to balance that budget. And this is a recommendation, but as we would point out, it's a recommendation from the Chief Justice, and it's, a starting point for your consideration.
I met with her just a little while ago today, and she was fairly adamant about it.
And she and other justices before her established a partnership with the Association of Oregon Counties, where we've gone through a process to really queue these projects up. And so, we've been involved with that process for the last 5 years or so, and really had pretty in-depth conversations about readiness conversations and who should go when and that sort of thing. And that has helped to inform her proposals.
As you talk about this, one of the lessons that I think the legislature has learned from the process so far, we had one county that could not deliver.
Right.
Tillamook because of that, and so we had to reallocate that money, and I think that's one of the issues. Whatever we approve, I'm assuming, coming out of Paul's committee is going to be a contingent funding, contingent on you getting the rest of the money together, and that's probably, if you miss that cycle, the legislature will move on to the next project, and it's probably something that you want to have that discussion with the voters as you propose your bond measure.
I did, Senator, I did.
May I interrupt and just call on Representative Willie, because we've been at this for about an hour, and I just want to make sure everybody that's come to the meeting gets a chance to give their perspective or ask questions.
UAB's got a great building. They'd love to.
Actually, my question is in regards to my new role on emergency preparedness. It sounded like, if you're talking about a 55 to 100-year building, you're building it to a pretty high seismic standard, but who's the right one to answer on?
Well, it's going to have the sheriff's office emergency operations center in it, so it's going to be considered critical infrastructure, which means it'll be to seismic zone 4 and all that. So, sorry for stepping in.
No, that's all I need to know.
The engineer knew the answer to that one.
Do you have any other questions or comments?
Actually, they already answered.
I do have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Judge, when I was talking with Chief Justice, she was talking about the need to expand support staff as being one of her highest priorities.
Right.
If she's successful in convincing us of that, will the building be adequate to staff that a higher level?
Yes, we, at this point in time, another on that sheet that you're going to see, it's 12.5% that we are down statewide for OJD, which is what she's talking about in the budget. When you look at what it is for Lane County, for us, we're actually down 17%. Okay, one thing that eCourt has really helped us out with is space, because everything is on these electronic filings, and eCourt is really taking care of a lot of some of the space problems we had before. But if we were to get back up to the staffing levels that are already approved staffing levels, the building would handle it very nicely. It would also take jury assembly and put it within security, which also will take care of some problems we have with staffing. Because jury assembly is outside security. And so just to get a jury upstairs, we have somebody now doing a study for us, checking how long it takes us to get jury pools upstairs. And we waste about 45 minutes, I think is where we're at.
40 minutes.
Just to get them from one.
Per person.
Right. Just to get them from one place to the other place.
I can attest to that. I was recently a juror.
Yes.
We
Very
also,
difficult.
we also have an interest in making sure the community benefits from the construction of this. And Commissioner Burney made some comments earlier this morning. Maybe this is a good time to bring that up.
Well, I think you all will like this. I know for a fact Paul and Lee and James will, and that is that we had a very spirited initial discussion of community benefits agreement, what the components of those are. I know that you are familiar with that, but for the commission, this group as a whole, it was a new discussion. And there seems to be a lot of interest. So that discussion is also happening, and I can't predict it. I know I can. I'm not legally allowed to speak for this board, and this is my first day. But I can let you know that we're seriously looking at putting a community benefits agreement. And interestingly enough, when I work with staff as a liaison, we'll be looking at the night community benefits agreement, the components of that you shared with me. And I think that this will be something we're all going to be very proud of.
And to be mindful of the legislators' time, I just want to ask if any of you have any other comments, questions. You've kind of got the 35,000-foot overview of this, and we have a lot of work to do if this is going to happen this year, and we appreciate all of your laboring oars on trying to keep that 87.6 proposal as alive as possible. We will do our part to prepare the materials enabling voters to make a good decision. I don't know if there are 5 votes. I think there are, but we need to have further discussion on whether we're going to go out in May or not. But I think in light of our experience on our board, former Representative Farr and former Senator Sorensen, we know that the legislative timetable is really crucial, and I think Senator Beyer and Representative Hovey, all of you have mentioned that. So I think that weighs heavily on going well. There's an opportunity. We definitely, as a community, do not want to suffer the fate of our friends in Tillamook County, where they are given this opportunity and then they don't see it as an opportunity, and some of that money may go into our courthouse. So that's the benefit of having strong public support. But we also need to be mindful of, well, what is that level of support? Was that, when you saw those numbers, was that enough? And so we'll have to make that decision pretty quickly. And the timeline, yeah, go ahead, Pat.
Has any comments or questions?
The only thing I was just thinking about was kind of the interplay of timing between if you're looking at a May election and a budget coming out in June, and just sort of like, if you were just speaking to that a little bit, if
Yeah.
there's any other thoughts there.
Well, I think that you heard from seasoned people around the table that the timing is really crucial, because it's a 2-year decision that the Legislative Assembly makes on a budget. And the proposal in front of the Legislative Assembly is a pretty substantial amount. Round numbers, 90 million of a $250 million project. That's a pretty substantial amount of money. I don't recall being given that advantage when I bought a house, when you take those numbers down from millions to hundreds of thousands, so, yeah.
Yeah, so I just, speaking to that a little bit, one of the reasons why I'm been pushing for us to go out in May is so that we maybe have that yes vote in hand as you guys decide on the allocation versus the way Tillamook happened, where you made the allocation and then they went out to the ballot. That's, really why I will continue pushing, although I can't make a commitment for the whole board, but it's one of the reasons why I've been pushing towards that and spoke towards it in the state of the county yesterday. I think that's really important for us to have that answer for you guys before you get the sine die.
Very advantageous to have an approval from the voters in May.
Yeah. But I think
The downside of that one,
understanding.
making sure you have enough time to convince the voters.
Yeah, well, understanding
Educate
that one of the things that the voters, that helps convince the voters is tying our issuance of those bonds to your approval of the matching fund. So there's going to sort of be we're going to go first, but it's a chicken and the egg thing, because I think in order to get to yes, we're going to have to say our yes is dependent on your yes.
But we'll get our yes first.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Cutler, did you want to say anything? I was kind of.
Well, the only thing I'll just follow up on is I did have a conversation with Legislative Fiscal Office about the sort of the challenge of us being the first courthouse project that would be needing to go out for an election. And the staff there was like, you're really like a community college in that we've got plenty of experience with community colleges that are asking for bond money contingent on local support. And, if it does go south, which it has for several community colleges, that sort of bonding capacity rolls forward and doesn't necessarily go away, but it just rolls forward. And that was one of the reasons why we've in the measure that we asked for to be drafted, there is some language, it probably doesn't really have much of an effect, but we try to preserve sort of the ability of the local money for as long as possible in the event that the May election does not go well for us. But I think we're really hopeful that the May election does go well, and to the extent we can count on the support of the delegation as we move forward into that local campaign, I think that would help to sway the voters, in addition to the things that we're doing, like an ordinance.
If you do a May election, you'll know the outcome before we get around to voting.
Yep.
That won't happen until mid-June. Well, actually, a little earlier this time. Early June, probably.
Early June is your target date for approving this budget.
The target for adjournment is June 30th. That's earlier.
The target is Peter Courtney's.
Everybody knows the target.
The constitutional.
Commissioner Buck has not made any comments, and she's asked to be recognized, so I'd like to recognize her.
I just wanted to share, we talked about this before you arrived as well. I'm looking closely at the dollars and the finances of how it works, and I previously asked the question of what happens if you allocate 10 million less than what we need. And that presents a challenge that maybe we'll hear about more. But it sounds to me that, what we request is really what we need. And I don't know how that works in your particular committee when you do that. But when you're a little less than what you've asked the voters that they would vote for and be matched, I don't know what it means on your end. And that's just an open question.
Sometimes we don't either. But, there's oftentimes a question about whether the project is scalable. And in this particular case, it probably isn't. you know, and so that will be a question up front.
And one other possibility is that allocation will be split into portions with the assumption and hope that second and final installment of a grant, for example, would come in a subsequent vote. You can't, one assembly can't bind the next assembly to that decision, but sometimes it's a question of how much is available in the bonding capacity. So who gets what when over a 2-year or 4-year period?
And sometimes they'll stagger that bonding authorization as well.
Okay. I said Representative Farr. Commissioner Farr?
I'm talking as Councilor Farr now. And I was going to direct this to you, Rep. Nathanson. You know, when you and I worked on the library, after we'd gone out and failed, we found a way to pass it.
I just remembered
That it passed. And that was a 164,000 square foot, 5-story building with a basement. And this is not unlike that as far as our role as a board. We have to be the ones who go out and lead the effort to make certain that everybody understands the value to the community, and not just the value of the facility and the function of the facility, but as Commissioner Burney talks about, the economic value, the value that it has to the community as a public work. It really is. It's a large and relatively complex message. It needs to be boiled down to the specific hearer of the message. What is important to them, and why is it important to every single person in this county? Not unlike the library. You know, it was tough for us to talk to people in Bethel, for instance, who don't come downtown. You know. So it becomes a really important issue that is incumbent on the board, not the staff, and not the legislature, but the board.
Okay, well, do you guys have any, generally speaking, the Legislative Assembly that we're working with today, do you have any more comments or questions? Because that's why we set this up, and we want to be respectful of your time and Representative Nathanson.
Thank you. I thought of one thing I want to raise, and I realized, oh my gosh, I have to be somewhere at 5. But I want to say, first of all, that I really enjoyed that video. It was very, very good information, presented well. I'm really glad I saw it, even though I thought, oh, I'm just going to hear what I've already heard before. Yeah, maybe I have heard most of it, but I really like the way it's presented. However, when people are envisioning what goes on in the courthouse and what kind of cases happen here, most people's experience is thinking about the people stuff. It might be criminal or it might be civil, but it's mostly about persons. What about businesses? I don't recall there was any discussion of what the business community depends on being settled. But in some report I read about how businesses make location decisions, access to skilled workforce was number 1, transportation was number 2, a reliable court or judicial system was 3rd. So I would just ask you to think about it. There might be something in some presentations you might want to add a bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. That is really good. Yeah, Judge, go ahead.
And Representative, one thing that has come out of that exactly is the help of the Bar Association, the local Bar Association. Those lawyers in the civil bar represent businesses. They've been very interested in how they can help with this project. They've asked me several times about how they can be of assistance because part of their clients' view when they come into the building is, really, right? It's a little embarrassing sometimes for big business to come into our building and see where their decision is being made. And the local bar has been very supportive, and I am speaking to them with the state of the court address on Thursday, and I will be showing this video and talking to them and connecting them hopefully with some of the people that can give them more direction on how they can be directly helpful. So hopefully that addresses some of that.
Thank you. That was really a great insight, Representative Nathanson. Okay, one closing comment is I thank you guys at the beginning of the meeting for the money that the county's already received from the taxpayers of Oregon through your hard work. But I didn't generically thank each and every one of you for, doing all the work it takes to get appointed if you were appointed, or elected if you were elected, and all the hard work of the committees and driving back and forth to Salem, all of the things I do not miss about the process. And I just really wish you have a great session, a wonderful session, really enjoy it, and really try to do what you can to help the people of Oregon. I'm sure you all will. And last but not least, if any of you are going to retire and create a vacancy, give us as much notice as you can, because we are, as you may know, in the appointment business, and we want to make sure that we think it through thoroughly. So.
You can take a break for 6 months anyway.
Oh, you want to do a 6-month furlough? Okay. Well, thank you very much, and we will stand recess for about 3 minutes to allow you guys to gracefully leave, but we still have more work to do here, so. And say, by my count, we finished items 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we are now ready, and we're not going to have an executive session either today or tomorrow, right? Today or tomorrow. We still have commissioners' business. We still have other business. We still have review of assignments. And so I'll just put it out for just a brief comment by commissioners. If we start any one of these items, we're going to go past 5 o'clock. And so my suggestion, and I'd like any reactions to this, my suggestion is that we recess until tomorrow morning, 8:15, right here, have the county administration work session on the budget, and when that finishes, go as long as we can on the remaining items that I've just covered on today's agenda.
My only concern, Mr. Chair, is I believe that the city of Eugene has the room and Metro beginning at 11:30.
Okay?
I think they.
Or is it
start at
11?
They closed the room down.
Wednesdays?
Could we move to the Commissioners' Conference Room at 11 a.m.?
Could the issues Metro, we won't have Metro because they film.
Would we have recording? We could have audio recording of our meeting.
I guess it depends on how much you think you have left to, because you really just have commissioner's business and then the review of assignments.
Well, I know we have,
It'd be 10 minutes.
Commissioner Bozovich has an item that he wants to add to.
To make the request, it's an agenda team request, should take less than 5 minutes. for
Okay,
items.
so we'll start a 5-minute round and go that way and do what we can. But your 5 minutes means there's 25 more minutes, right? There's 20 more minutes.
Well, not everyone will have agenda team requests.
Okay.
At this time, I'm
All right.
sure. But, and I don't have any announcements, but I have 2 agenda team requests. They're very quick, just to have them put on the list for the agenda to come up. One is, I got a request from a member of the Latgawa tribe if we would provide a support letter with some legislation that's going to be introduced to have them be recognized. They were left off the list of tribes in 56 that were not, that when they disbanded all the tribes, so getting back in, the Bureau of Indian Affairs doesn't recognize them right now, but it's basically a local tribe that never surrendered to the U.S. government. And so just, it's a matter of having Alex prepare a support letter, us discussing and voting on it, but I'd just like to have that placed on the agenda in the future.
Okay, and
And it's, 3 head knots sort of thing.
right, do we want to just use that technique? I mean, that seems like a pretty good technique for something like this. So I'll say I'm in favor of having Alex write a support letter and having it brought back to the board.
If 3 of us say yes.
I'm nodding.
Yeah. The general, and just for you guys, the general thing is a single commissioner can't direct staff, but the quorum of the commissioners can direct staff. So if we bring things up at agenda team and get 2 other commissioners to agree, staff can prepare an item to come back to the agenda.
And it's a good thing in this case where you have some, where there's going to be some research and there'll be a letter and we'll be able to take a look at it.
The second item is.
So I think we have at least 3 commissioners that want to do that.
Yeah, I saw Commissioner Farr and yourself and myself, and it seemed like everybody, there's general consensus. Second, real quick, is Collard Lake Road is a local access road on the coast that we've had much discussion about the fact the county maintained it at one point. We've stopped maintaining it because we stopped maintaining local access roads. It had a slide in this last storm and is in danger of being cut off, and there's multiple houses up there. And it will take board action if the county is going to take any repair work there. I would like to have something come back to the board, maybe almost on an emergency basis about Collard Lake, but in general, our policy on local access roads. We stopped maintaining them when we lost all of our timber funding. Now we've got House Bill 2017 giving us a little bit more funding. How we draw that line, this particular road serves almost 100 residences. Now, my local access road serves 20. I don't really expect the county to pick up maintenance on my road, but is there a dividing line that we want to look at? And it's a really important issue, because if we start with Collard Lake Road and we don't develop a policy, we're going to have every local access road coming to us for emergency repair. So if that could be a future agenda item we could discuss, and maybe have Collard Lake come back maybe almost on an emergency basis, because it's got an active slide right now.
How do you feel about having that item be taken to Public Works and having them make a,
Come back with a proposal.
yeah,
Yeah, but
Okay.
it's going to take, if there's a
Yeah.
majority of the board that wishes Public Works to undertake that activity.
I personally, I personally think that we should have a briefing by Public Works on the generic topic of county's involvement with local access roads, but more specifically, the Collard Lake Road in particular. So, you know, and have them come back with a memo to the board, and the agenda team can put it on the agenda.
Great.
Okay. Do we have 3 commissioners that want to see that done?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have those two items for future, going to the agenda team for scheduling. Are there any other, how do you want to do this? Do you want to have other agenda team requests now, or do you want to have announcements? Do you have to leave? Keep going?
Let's keep going.
Keep going, okay. So at this time, I'll ask if there are any other agenda team requests, starting right here.
No.
Okay, none. I thought you wanted to bring up this liaison
Oh,
thing.
forgive me for not knowing the process.
Yeah, that's okay.
So, help me if you would, Mr. Chair. If we just had a discussion, there was no action taken, I offered to be a board liaison
Yeah,
to staff to develop a proposal around community benefits that the board.
well,
could-
I guess I would phrase it as, and maybe Mr. Mulcahy could even help us, but I would phrase it as, you know, what committees currently exist that don't have a commissioner liaison, and what would be the request is, can you look into what committees currently exist and what committees could be formed that would engage the board in having a liaison to that committee dealing with courthouse issues?
So I would say a couple things. The board had previously appointed Commissioner Bozovich as the liaison to, I forget the name of the
Stakeholders.
yeah, courthouse stakeholder group.
Yeah.
So we have one representative there. The board, you can say maybe you want to add another, although I don't know what that does in terms of public noticing, or make a change there. Alternatively, and actually I think that it may be nice for us to have at least 2 commissioners involved in different, in more in-depth discussion and process regarding the courthouse. And my thought is, if this is particularly related to the community benefits agreement, we're going to work, that was the head nods from the commissioners, and when I do review of assignments, I'll get this on the record, that Commissioner Burney is going to work with staff to develop this community benefits agreement. That will come back to the board, probably in the form of a board order. The board will likely be asked to take action, and you will or won't take action on that. And if it's approved, then at that point, maybe we have a conversation as we head through if there is a ballot measure and we go through that process. It's really after May that work is gonna happen. And then maybe we look at creating a group that is focused on implementation of what was included in this community benefits agreement framework, and you appoint a commissioner.
So do you think, I'm just asking Commissioner Burney this, do you think it will be more courthouse-oriented or more community benefit agreement-oriented? Or is it community benefit and the courthouse?
It's the latter.
Okay.
And I think community benefit and the courthouse gives this board a working experience that will or won't apply hopefully will apply, but we'll see.
Yeah.
To other capital.
Two other things.
So maybe what I can do is take, as part of the assignment to work on the community benefits agreement, that we also, the staff will take, looking at how would it make sense to add another spot on the state courthouse stakeholder group? This includes like the presiding judge, the sheriff, the DA, and some staff
This
folks.
isn't something we went over on our list.
It is,
You're mentioning that the board appointed Commissioner Bozovic.
it was
and we weren't-
discussed in a board meeting, yes,
see.
to have a board representative
Okay.
on this group, right? It's not, it has not been formed as, it doesn't have bylaws or part of the Lane
Yeah,
manual.
okay.
But potentially we could consider, would it make sense for us to add an additional spot? So there are two commissioners that are represented there, or is there another?
Do not ad hoc, do not ad hoc things occur? Because
Yes, this is an ad hoc.
This is ad
is,
hoc.
right.
And I really will take the advice of Commissioner Farr, and this relates to policy. This doesn't relate to implementation.
Well, maybe,
methods,
yeah, maybe,
or those levels of detail.
maybe, if I could just say, maybe we could have Mr. Mokrahysky come back on this request specifically of what committee is there that Commissioner Burney could be either appointed to or added to of an existing committee where the community benefit agreement component could be discussed, and that he would have what is the heart of what he's trying to do right now.
Okay,
How's that sound?
sounds great.
But we're only going to do that if 3 commissioners agree to put that on the agenda, right?
That's true.
So,
And
go
I
ahead.
agree with that. However, I'm reluctant to add a particular commissioner's name to it until we have further discussion. because
Yeah.
It may be something I'm interested in doing.
That's correct. That's correct. So we'll just have it be a request that he'll bring it back. We'll discuss it. We'll vote on it. We'll discuss it, whatever. Okay. So besides me and Commissioner Burney, who else is in favor of staff spending time on that? Very good. So we have 5 people that want to do that. Any other requests for the agenda, for future agenda?
None for me at this.
None for you. Okay, I want to present a memo I got. Oops, here it is. And what I want to do is actually just hand it out. And my proposal for the agenda is to have some, I think I have 6 copies of this thing. So here's 2 going that way, and here's 3 going that way. So there's a total of 6. This is from Ernie Nemi. He's an economist and president of something called Natural Resource Economics. He's written a pretty extensive memo. I must say I have skimmed it. I have not read it entirely. But what I did want to do is have some authority from the board to have Mr. Nemi come in and talk about climate change from an economics perspective. And he does make some recommendations in it. I don't really want to set this up for too much time, but I do want to have an opportunity for this presentation to occur if he's willing to do it. I believe he wants to do it because of the seriousness of climate change and his and knowledge of it. And so I was wanting to get board buy-in or head nods to schedule some time for him to come into a board meeting and talk about climate change and its implications to Lane County. And that will not require us to do anything other than to hear him, but there may be some follow-up that we might want to do as a result of hearing his presentation.
I would love to hear his presentation.
Okay. I don't know how long it might take. I certainly would just leave that up to the agenda team and figure out. And I didn't really want to involve staff other than maybe we would wait until after the presentation to see if the board wants to do anything more with it other than hear the presentation. So are there three commissioners that want to have a presentation by Dr. Nemi on this?
I would, once again, I would love to hear it. I think hearing the information from Dr. Nemi would be valuable for all of us.
Okay. Okay, that's two, that's three. Okay, very good. So you got his memo. I'll let him know the commissioners have his memo, and we'll work with the staff to schedule some time for him to make the presentation. Are there any other agenda requests?
I have one tiny little announcement.
Okay, let's get through the agenda request. The next thing I wanted to bring up was the Board of Commissioners today in our consent calendar approved several emergency procedures involving what do we do in an emergency. And we've had this now a couple of times where we've had our emergency services people come in and kind of give us an overview of, well, what are we supposed to do when there's an emergency? How am I supposed to call a board meeting without a cell phone? How does staff get a hold of us? Do we have some sort of process for this? In one scenario we worked on with Commissioner Bozovich's, there was a school shooting, I believe, in the scenario, and we weren't able to reach him in the scenario. Well, we got two new commissioners, and the worst thought in my mind about today or tomorrow was, what if we had an emergency before we could even have a briefing on what do we do in an emergency? So that was going to be my agenda request, that we get our emergency services person or former emergency services person. We're out seeking emergency services right now, but we kind of go over, I know this is old news for some of us, but I wouldn't.
Years old, as a matter of fact.
You can
Always good to be
It's always got to be ready. Okay.
Be reminded what ICS is. Basically, it's doing an incident command structure training for elected officials. I think it's ICS 401 or something like that, they call it.
And we're 5 years closer to Cascadia. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yes, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, and I know that it is, kind of a rerun for some of us, but I really can't.
Technology's changed too.
Yeah, technology's changing, and we may be talking about issuing radios to commissioners or something so that there's something beyond cell phones.
Wrist radios.
Yeah, exactly.
Joe laughed.
Go back to our childhoods. Well, some of us will go back to our childhoods. So are there three commissioners that want to have us try to put in some kind of emergency briefing? Okay. Yes. Okay, I think I'll have just one more today, and that is, last year, the Board of Commissioners changed the appeal fee for certain land use decisions. And my recollection is the fee was $250 in most of 2016 and 2017. And in 2018, the Board of Commissioners passed a board order or ordinance or lane manual change that increased the fee to people that were trying to appeal land use decisions from $250 to $950. And I wanted to have a board discussion of whether that has resulted in fewer appeals because the dollar amount is in fact too much for most individuals and citizen groups that are doing the appealing. We're not scheduled to have a discussion of that unless three commissioners want to bring that up.
Has that been in place more than 3 months? We only did that in the fall, I thought.
It was, it came through
September?
So I think it's been 6 months, Jay.
Has it?
Probably 6 months.
Yeah.
But that might be a good thing in terms of the request to get a half a year's worth of data so that there's
And
some.
it's not the first appeal, it's the second appeal that we raised the fee on.
Okay.
First appeal is still $250.
Okay. So what about getting a briefing on the first 6 months of the increase to the,
I think the
Okay.
management staff might be able to put that data together.
okay. Any comments on that from your end?
No, we can present the data that we have.
Okay,
I'm not aware of if we've had any of those second appeals or what that looks like, but we can certainly make the request.
okay. So if we have, 30, if we have 6 months' worth of data, then we will be able to compare that to any other 6-month period for whatever that was worth. Okay, so we have 3 head nods for that. Yes, 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 okay. And for that, I think we should go back to item 9A for our commissioner announcements. And before we go to our review of assignments. So we'll start with Commissioner Bozovich, who said he had an announcement.
No, I don't have any.
He doesn't, okay. You just had an agenda team request. Okay,
No,
no
not
announcements?
at this time.
For me,
Okay,
Yes, I do. No, I'm just kidding. Just one, and Heather, you probably heard about this. Over the weekend, there's a burglary at Oak Ridge Elementary School, which is also the K through 8 school in Oak Ridge. And all of their laptops were stolen. And the teachers' personal laptop was stolen. So I just wanted to announce, they have a GoFundMe that is occurring right now. And if anybody's listening at this point in time, take a look at it, because, some pretty devastating results from complete theft of all of the technology in the classroom. So I know you probably heard about it. It's just kind of breaking today that this happened. But Oak Ridge School District doesn't have a lot of extra cash in their pocket. And they're not going to be able to replace. I think there were 28 individual laptops stolen and the teacher's personal computer. So just wanted to mention that.
okay. Thank you. I just wanted to remind the commissioners that we have meetings coming up tomorrow at 8:15 right here in Harris Hall. Ms. Moody, as well as many other people, will be giving a review of the budget kickoff. Of course, as with all of our meetings, they're open to the public. And if we have other work after the budget meeting, I would like to reconvene the board so that if commissioners have any questions about how things are going or make other requests for the agenda or anything, that we can continue that discussion. And I'll just invite the commissioners to, once we finish the meeting with the agenda of the budget, that we get together and finish up everything. Do you want to do the review now, or do you want to review tomorrow when we reconvene?
It'd be my preference to do it now. I've got a whole slate of meetings tomorrow afternoon after our budget meeting, so if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind running through those now. We have the request from Commissioner Burney and the head nods for to work with staff to develop a community benefits agreement. I won't go through all the things that he highlighted, but we'll do that work. And then I have, along with that, for staff to consider the incorporation of another commissioner in a combination of the courthouse project work as well as this community benefits piece. So that later request I'm just kind of putting with that work. Commissioner Bozovich had 2 requests: the Gala Tribe support letter that'll come back to the board, and then a discussion on policy regarding local road maintenance, specific to, for example, Collard Lake Road.
Mr. Mokryski, on the Gala Tribe request, is there a part of that, and maybe I'm also asking Commissioner Bozovich, is there also a checking in with the other tribes, the recognized tribes? I would like to make sure that we're not sending a letter that is in conflict with what the recognized tribes, or at least I'd like to know that. Have you checked with them?
No, I haven't yet. I just got the request over the weekend.
Yeah.
And forwarded it to Alex yesterday.
I think that that would be a little piece of nuance on that is the Coquille and Siuslaw and other adjacent tribes may have an opinion on this. They may not.
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
So we have those two, and then the three requests from Commissioner Sorensen, the presentation by Dr. Namey, is it?
Uh-huh.
A briefing regarding emergency management, and an update from land management regarding the land use appeal fee data trending. That was everything I had. There are also a number of questions regarding the courthouse, and maybe we'll put those in a bucket. There's going to be a lot of courthouse discussions coming up, but questions about polling, the voter pamphlet, and the Plan B if cost overruns. So we took all those and we'll report back either next week or the following week with information on that.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so I see we have other business, a catch-all for everything else that hasn't been talked about. Do we have any requests under other business? I see none. So we are, we're in recess, I guess, till tomorrow at 8:15, right here. Have a good evening.